Madam President and honorable senators, Madam Speakers and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, good morning. Psalm 78 in 4 states, "We will not hide them from their children, but tell to the coming generations the glorious deeds of the Lord and of his might." Today is a wonderful day to recall the diamond anniversary of women gaining the right to vote. It is important that we pause to thank God for this historic milestone in the life of our country and to honor the many women who made this momentous occasion possible. But it is also a time to give thanks to God, who establishes times and seasons and appoints persons to be trailblazers and visionaries in their season. This significant event in our country removed barriers and opened doors for women and have made it possible for our first woman to be elected to the House of Assembly 40 years ago and for 9 women to now grace these honorable chambers in this season. But it has also opened the door for many women to break the glass ceiling in many spheres of our country. Psalm 9:1 states, "I will recall all of your wonderful deeds." Sheryl Sandberg said, "Leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence and making sure that your impact lasts in your absence." In this Thanksgiving season, the impact of the visionary leaders of the suffragette movement continues to influence present generations. It is imperative that we never forget their courage, vision, tenacity, and unity that resulted in a paradigm shift for women in our country. Each woman and young girl that is blessed with wonderful opportunities to excel in all areas of our society and to smash glass ceilings in places where women did not previously hold leadership should remember our inspired foremothers who dared to dream of a more inclusive Bahamas. On this day, I challenge each of you to make sure that the significance of this historic event be understood and taught to each generation of Bahamians. I challenge you to always to be grateful for the time, for these women who dreamed new dreams that made the future better for those who followed. I challenge you to be determined that the purpose that God has for you in this season and to cultivate a legacy that will outlive you long after you're gone. And I challenge you to develop a national listing of all women of the suffragette movement. Psalms 46 and a part of verse 5 states, "God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved." Rosa Parks states, "Each person must live their life as a model for others." Let us pray. Dear Lord, today we give you thanks for the opportunity to celebrate the diamond anniversary of women gaining the right to vote in our Bahamas. We praise you for raising up visionary suffragists who were willing to stand up to the powers of their day to gain voting rights for women. May we never forget their contribution and the sacrifice that they made to make life better for those of us who followed. We pray that each parliamentarian will do their part to cultivate a legacy that will positively affect all who follow them. In times of fear, give them courage. In times of weakness, strength. When they become disillusioned, give them wisdom. And may they trust in you and allow you to guide them as they enact laws and policies for our Bahamas. Bless them today in all their endeavors. And bless our Bahamas. In the precious name of Jesus Christ we pray. Please join with me in the prayer of our Lord. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
in case you want to recognize.
The message first. Okay. Good morning. Message to the Speaker and members of the Honorable House of Assembly from the President and the Honorable Members of the Senate. The President and Honorable Members of the Senate, having assembled by notice issued by the President and having had deliberations on the invitation from the Honorable House of Assembly to meet in a joint sitting of the Parliament, are pleased to inform the Speaker and members of the Honorable House of Assembly that the President and Honorable Senators have graciously accepted your invitation in the form of the following resolution agreed by the Honorable Senate. Resolved that this Senate accepts the invitation extended by the Honorable House of Assembly to meet in a joint sitting of the Parliament in the chamber of the Honorable House of Assembly on Wednesday, 23rd of November, 2022 at 10 a.m. Be it further resolved that this Senate stands adjourned to Wednesday, 23rd of November, 22 in the said joint sitting of the Parliament in the debating chamber of the Honorable House of Assembly. Good morning, honorable members. I would like to welcome to our chamber today Madam President and honorable senators. I, along with members of the Honorable House of Assembly, would like to thank you for your most gracious acceptance of our humble invitation to meet in this joint sitting today. We have done everything we could to make you as comfortable as possible. So on behalf of all members of the Honorable House of Assembly, I say welcome. Honorable members, today is a very special occasion. Our bicameral Parliament has unanimously agreed to a joint sitting of the two houses. So today we have assembled here for a solemn occasion. We have assembled to pay exclusive tribute to women in a way we have neglected to pay it heretofore. Indeed, it is long overdue. We have come together to celebrate and commemorate the achievement and contributions of women in the various stages and aspects of our national journey. Today, on this solemn occasion, male parliamentarians will honor women parliamentarians with their silence for the most part. It is not often that this Parliament meets in joint session, except for the opening of a new Parliament, at least once every 5 years. But this joint session is different. The last time this Parliament agreed to and met in a joint sitting like this one was November 26, 2012, some 10 years ago. The subject matter on that occasion was similar to the subject of our discussion today. That is to say, we have assembled to pay tribute to the contribution of women in this Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I have noticed that we have a full gallery of mostly female visitors who are waiting in anticipation of what is to come. 2 resolutions will be considered by this joint sitting. Our second resolution will be to pay special tribute to the Honorable Dame Janet Gwyneth Boswick, who has set a very high standard for all women to follow. I will relax some of the rules today to allow you to show your support for what is going to be said. So you may clap if you feel the urge to do so. We have a large number of visitors and invited guests, all of whom unfortunately could not be accommodated in the gallery today. This underscores the need for a new parliamentary complex. And thankfully, the government is actively engaged in the logistics of a new edifice for this institution. This joint session today will demonstrate what can be achieved when the Bahamas speaks with one voice. I must say that I have been looking forward to today's sitting so that we as women can demonstrate how nicely we can conduct the people's business without confrontation and without disagreement. Honorable members, I'm impressed and appreciative of all of the contributions of the now countless number of women who played their roles in the development of this country. But no story of the struggle for equality and freedom moves me like the story of poor Black Kate. She defied the orders of her enslavers and preferred death over the dishonor of enslavement. She willingly paid the ultimate price and found freedom in the bosom of the earth. We must never forget poor Black Kate. More importantly, we must never allow her memory to be forgotten. The price she paid must be remembered. And one day, I hope the Commonwealth of the Bahamas will find a fitting tribute to poor Black Kate for standing against an evil so horrible she could not bear it. We must remember, men watched the horror of poor Black Kate's death and chose slavery instead. Kate chose death. We often sing in song, "Before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free." Whenever I hear that song, I remember poor Black Kate, and I often wonder how truly we really believe that song when we sing it. So without further delay, I will now invite the President of the Senate to offer a few welcoming remarks.
Good morning, Senators and members of the House of Assembly. The Chair extends profound and sincere gratitude to the Senate Chaplain, Reverend Carla Culmer, for your biblically sound and inspiring devotion and prayer. Your uncompromising commitment to the Bahamas Senate and the country on the whole is greatly respected and appreciated. May God continue to hold you in the palm of his hands and bless you and your ministry. The Chair thanks Madam Speaker, the Honorable Patricia DeVoe, and members of the Honorable House of Assembly for inviting the President of the Senate and Honorable Senators to this historical joint sitting of the Senate and Parliament. Madam Speaker, indeed it is a pleasure to co-chair this prestigious occasion as we commemorate the 60th anniversary of women obtaining the right to vote. I therefore do not hesitate in declaring all glory unto God for great things he has done. We have come a long way. Madam Speaker, it is with great humility and of notable importance that this joint session is being chaired by two women presiding officers. A first for our country. I shall be forever grateful to God for this seminal moment in time. Madam Speaker, the current Senate comprises a 16-member team, of which 25% are women. From 1964 to present, 6 men have been appointed as president, and I'm proud to be the 6th woman, making the gender ratio of Senate presidents 50-50. Indeed, we have come a long way. These historic feats would never have been possible without the courage and wisdom of our forefathers who held this country accountable to its democratic tenets by advocating for women to have full political participation via the right to vote and serving in government. The annals of history correctly records that in the not-too-distant past, there was a country in the Western Hemisphere, 55 miles off the coast of Florida, where over 54,000 women resided. Although they represented half of the population at that time, unfortunately, they were treated as less than second-class citizens. Bahamian women were socially, economically, and politically marginalized and disadvantaged. Although for generations, women had tilled the fields and gathered the crops, they could not own land, whilst women were wives and mothers and sisters and friends, and individuals who contributed significantly to nation building by taking care of their husbands and extended families, nurturing their children and communities, establishing cottage industries, and working in political campaigns. They could not cast a ballot to determine their own political destiny. Whilst women labored in the workforce, their compensation was far below that of their male counterparts, and maternity leave was non-existent. Since women could not vote, they could not be on the jury. Therefore, only men could decide the fate of matters before the courts. This culminated in what was unequivocally a system of taxation without representation, an egregious violation of democratic principles. Alas, in the 1950s, 7 transformative women leaders, Mary Ingram, Dr. Doris Johnson, Mabel Walker, Eugenia Lockhart, Althea Mortimer, Georgiana Simonet, Alberta Isaacs, organized and became the catalyst for the women's suffrage movement in the Bahamas. These remarkable women, along with others, were resilient, fierce, intelligent, and unstoppable in their determination to deepen democracy and obtain basic civil rights for all Bahamian women. They commenced a journey that brought women from diverse backgrounds towards common goals of equality, empowerment, and enfranchisement. They were on a long walk towards freedom. The efforts were successful and paved the way for women to not only vote, but kick down the glass ceiling in key government and the private sector. The chair acknowledges and congratulates Senator Ruby Ann Dowling for leading by example 60 years ago. The bold step of being the first woman to register to vote encouraged a generation. Your story is interesting because you did not stop there. Former President of Chile, Michelle Bachelet, once said, "A better democracy is a democracy where women do not only have the right to vote, but to elect. Do not only have the right to vote and to elect, but more importantly, to be elected." Senator Cooper Darling, you exemplify these words by not only leading the way to the ballot box, but by becoming the second Bahamian woman to be elected to this honorable House. On a personal note, the chair appreciates your godly wisdom, honesty, kindness, compassion, and willingness to leap over barriers on behalf of the poor and oppressed, and your life's work of giving back to our nation. We thank you for your sacrifices and salute your accomplishments. The chair also pays homage to Dame Janet Musgrove Boswick, who is deservedly recognized as a national champion for the cause of women in the Bahamas. She was ushered into history in 1982 as the first woman to be elected into Parliament. She also served as the first female Attorney General and the first acting Prime Minister. These accomplishments, along with the numerous other historic political roles, bears witness to a lifelong commitment and focus on increasing the number of women serving in government. We are forever indebted to her legacy. Both Senator Ruby Ann Dowling and Dame Janet Bostwick were neighbors in East Street while growing up as teenagers. Therefore, fate had it that years later, these two childhood friends went on to entrench their footprints in Parliament. We thank you both for your journey from East Street to Bay Street and for being beacons of light for Bahamian men, women, and children. Another woman who truly made her mark on the nation is Dr. Dame Doris Johnson. She was brave, courageous, innovative, forward-thinking, fearless, and a powerful liberating force for the freedom that women now enjoy. A woman whose vision for our nation was twilights beyond her time. Although she passed away nearly 40 years ago, her contributions to the social and political landscape of this country should never be forgotten. In January 1959, the then Speaker of the House of Assembly actually denied her request to address the House of Assembly from within these very halls. Let me say that again. Dr. Dame Doris Johnson was denied the access to speak in this very chamber. May I once again declare, we have come a long way. Thus, her famous and impassioned game-changing speech was given from Magistrate Maxwell Thompson's courtroom. Oh, but how the tides of change were swiftly moving. In just 3 short years, women's right to political participation was entrenched, and Dame Doris went on to experience many firsts in her political career. In 1962, she was the first woman to contest a general election running in the Eleuthera district. In 1967, she became the first woman appointed to the Senate. In 1968, she was reappointed to the Senate and became the first woman to lead government business in the Senate. In 1968, she became the first woman to serve in the cabinet of the Bahamas as the Minister of Transport. In 1973, she became the first woman to serve as President of the Senate. In 1979, she briefly served as the first woman Governor General. What an illustrious political career for all of us to emulate. She was an enduring symbol that paved the way for other women Senate presidents, such as my mentor and friend, Lady Sharon Wilson, KC, Lynn Holowesco, Kay Forbes Smith, and Dr. Mildred Hall. The chair is of the view that it is only fitting that the contribution of this political giant of a woman should be further entrenched in Bahamian history by naming the Senate chamber the Dame Doris Johnson Senate building and having a statue of her placed in the Parliament Square. To paraphrase the words of Michelle Obama, it was North Stars like Ruby Ann Dowling, Janet Bostwick, and Dame Doris Johnson who demonstrated that as women we should never underestimate our importance, because history has shown us that courage can be contagious and hope can take on a life of its own. We see the legacy reaching down to today. It is noteworthy that 7 women were instrumental in the fight for equality and voting rights. And on the 60th anniversary of women's suffrage, we celebrate 7 magnificent women being elected to Parliament. This generation has further been inspired and refreshed with hope by the visionary Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Brave Davis Casey, who invited 5 women parliamentarians to his cabinet, representing the largest woman serving at one time in cabinet in Bahamian history. Mr. Prime Minister, I once again congratulate you for setting the right tone at the top and recognizing that gender equality and women's empowerment are essential components of human development and basic human rights. and for demonstrating your belief by embracing a gender-sensitive cabinet. Mr. Prime Minister, your understanding, commitment, and appreciation of women's leadership and the need for their inclusivity, equality, and representation in our parliaments provide a paradigm shift and sends a clarion call message to women and girls of all ages throughout this Commonwealth that yes, we can. The Chair highly commends this current vortex of women parliamentarians for your stellar leadership, reform measures, and practical policies specifically targeted to make life easier for all who reside here. Your hard work, drive, and determination will leave a legacy of a better Bahamas. At this significant moment in our young democracy, you understand the assignment and recognize that the advancement of women's rights and education of young girls are critical preconditions for effective and sustainable development. I am extremely proud of each member of Parliament and each senator. It is a pleasure to serve with you trailblazers, and I urge you to continue to light your world. As I close, to paraphrase the words of the late political prisoner turned president Nelson Mandela, we have walked a long road to freedom. We have tried not to falter, but we have made missteps along the way. But we have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. On the 60th anniversary, we have taken a moment to rest, to commemorate, reflect in the halls of democracy, and to steal a view from the glorious vista, Kumo Hill, if you please, to look back on the distance from where you have come. But we can only rest for a moment, for with freedom come responsibilities. We dare not linger, for our long walk is not yet ended. Within the Bahamian context, our long walk to freedom has not yet ended when there is only 17% representation in the House of Assembly. It is the Chair's firm belief that when women are underrepresented in areas of democracy, women issues are ignored and inequality is actively deepened. Pearl S. Buck, the first American woman to be awarded a Pulitzer Nobel Peace Prize in Literature, said it best. For no country is a true democracy whose women have not an equal share in life with men. And until this is realized, we shall never achieve a real democracy on earth. We need increased representation of women in the House of Assembly. The Bahamas Parliament, established in 1979, is the third oldest parliament in the British Commonwealth after Westminster. It is my belief that parliamentary age should equally reflect this maturity with advancement in human rights, diversity, inclusivity, and gender equality. I hereby recommend the launch of a focused audit that will review barriers to representation and participation and make recommendations for greater diversity and inclusion in our parliaments. Our long walk to freedom is not yet ended. When women are indiscriminately victims of gender-based violence and there is no domestic violence legislation for their protection, freedom, justice, and equality demands a gender-based violence act now. Our long walk to freedom has not yet ended when the marital bed becomes a violent mattress. Rape is rape, notwithstanding the context. The Bible reminds us that men ought to love their wives in the way that Christ loves the church and died for it. This love is defined in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 as being patient and kind and not delighting in evil. Freedom and justice demands legislation which outlaws spousal rape. Our long walk to freedom has not yet ended when we have an inordinate amount of Bahamian women being diagnosed and subsequently dying from breast cancer and other forms of cancer. This country is in dire need of preventive measures and cancer research. Freedom demands priority is given to the health and wellness of women. Our long walk to freedom has not yet ended when Bahamian women are discriminated against. We do not receive the same salary compensation, promotion, and benefits as our male counterparts for the same work. Our walk to freedom demands pay equity and economic empowerment. Our long walk to freedom has not yet ended when young men are brutally murdered and our children are not safe in their homes and in the wider community. Freedom demands that we take the necessary measures to end violence now for all those who reside and visit our nation. Politically, we have come a long way from 1962, but we must collectively realize that our long walk is not yet ended, and there are many more hills to climb, many more tears to dry, and loftier goals that need our immediate attention. Finally, as we continue on this long walk, it is my hope that the current women parliamentarians will leave the door open so that the women who follow can not only smash the remaining glass ceiling, but thrive in a political atrium of limitless possibilities, exceptional opportunities, and boundless freedoms. May God bless each and every one of you, and may God bless this beautiful Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I hereby table the President's communication.
Thank you, Honorable President. Before we move on, I would like to draw our attention to the gallery today. I would like to acknowledge the presence of Dame Marguerite Pindling, wife of former Prime Minister Lyndon Pindling and former Governor General. Let's greet her today. I would also like to acknowledge history, as we have all the First Ladies sitting on our front row today. Let us welcome Lady Anne Marie Davis, Lady Dolores Ingram, Lady Dolores Ingram, and Lady Patricia Minnis. I would also like to acknowledge the lady who broke the glass ceiling for all of us, our first female Deputy Everything and Prime Minister, Dame Janet Boswick. Another lady that shattered the glass ceiling for women, of the Honorable Cynthia Mother Pratt, first female Deputy Prime Minister and now sitting Deputy Governor General. And I'd like to acknowledge another first. Some have forgotten her. First Director of Immigration. She's sitting in this hall today. She's my sister and friend. I'd like to recognize Lady Sharon Wilson. I'd like to acknowledge the lady who graced this chair as the first, and she's sitting in this gallery today, Lady Rome Italia Johnson. I'd like to also recognize Lady Allison Maynard Gibson, very strong advocate. And to all the former parliamentarians and all of you ladies that have joined us this morning, good morning. Honorable members, We have assembled in this joint sitting of the Parliament to deliberate on 2 resolutions. I presume we are ready to commence. The Chair will now entertain a motion from the Honourable Member from Angliston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam President, I stand to move the following resolution. Whereas the Parliament of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, on behalf of the Bahamas, recognize, honor, and salute Mrs. Mary Ingram, Mrs. Eugenia Lockhart, Ms. Georgiana K. Simonet, Mrs. Mabel Walker, and Dame Doris Johnson, and I will add, and all those God-fearing women who, in their quest for justice and equity for all Bahamians, established and led the women's suffrage movement with the support of other women. And whereas the Parliament recognizes the courageous, visionary, and historic contribution of the women's suffrage movement in expanding the cause of enfranchisement, liberation, equality, social justice, human rights, and democracy in the Bahamas. And whereas the 23rd day of November 2022, it should be the 26th of November 2022, marks the 60th anniversary of women exercising for the first time the right to vote in the Bahamas. And whereas the Parliament recognizes the role of the women's suffrage movement in the establishment of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, a free and democratic sovereign nation founded upon Christian values. And whereas the Parliament recognizes the vital contribution of women in and out of Parliament and in every field of work in the public and private sectors. And whereas the contribution of women have expanded to include all areas of the Bahamian society, social, religious, education, and otherwise. The vision, be it therefore resolved that the Parliament and people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas do honor and recognize and forever celebrate A, the vision and courage of the leaders and members of the women's suffrage movement. B, their contribution to the enfranchisement, universal suffrage, and social and political change in the Bahamas. C, the 60th anniversary of the enfranchisement of women. And D, the continued work and contribution of women in the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, Madam President, I am humbled to stand to my feet this morning in this honorable House to move this resolution in commemoration of one of the most important moments in Bahamian history. 60 years ago, in the general election held on the 26th of November 1962, Bahamian women walked into polling stations nationwide and voted for the first time ever. This triumphant manifestation was the consequence of years of struggle and the result of uninterrupted determination of women from all walks of life. The significance and weight of this event can only be fully understood within the context of the comprehensive barriers and strictures that women were forced to face and which inhibited full human development. The suffragette movement was a fundamental human rights movement, a social justice necessity, and in pursuit of this, there would be no compromise, no deterrent, no holds barred, no prisoners taken. And this was powerfully expressed 3 years earlier, on the 19th of January 1959, when one of the leaders of that suffragette struggle, Doris Johnson, in a brilliantly constructed speech, reminded all who could hear that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights guarantees to all men and women, regardless of race, color, or sex, the fundamental right to vote. In that speech, she reaffirmed the faith of the suffragettes in the equal rights of men and women. This was in 1959. And a preparedness to perpetuate these ideas to our children. She cited specifically Article 1 and 2 of that declaration. Namely, 1, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And 2, everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, or sex. She declared, and I quote, We seek no compromise. There is no alternative. We abhor delaying action. We women are ready, willing, and able. You must no longer deny us our rights. Gentlemen, if you deny the people their right, you will be found fighting against God. The suffragette movement coincided with a larger movement for freedom and social justice, which was underway in our country, then a British colony under the control of a powerful minority oligarchy. And it is of note that Doris Johnson's speech was given in the months after the general strike of 1958. In the immediate aftermath of that strike, the British Secretary of State for the Colonies, Lennox Boyd, was sent to Nassau to investigate the causes of the general strike. He wrote a statement containing his recommendations for action by the House, which was tabled in the House of Assembly in April of 1958. Among those recommendations was reform was universal male adult suffrage. The Secretary of State is reported to have amplified this narrow recommendation by declaring that he was not sufficiently satisfied that the demand for an extension of the franchise to women was widespread enough to justify including it among the constitutional changes that were needed immediately. It was clear he did not understand that not only were women fully participant in that strike, but that there was afoot a strident awakening by women who were demanding their own unique freedom rights. And it was this negligent declaration, this exclusion of the rights of women for immediate reform by Lennox Boyd, which in the words of Doris Johnson, in that speech, she says, mobilized the energies of the women and prompted her famous speech. This observation was made despite the fact that in his own country, women openly and freely exercised the franchise. She noted that this statement by the Secretary was issued despite the fact, he had facts, that a petition signed by more than 3,000 women had been presented to him by a delegation of women from the suffragette movement. At a later public meeting held in Nassau on April 28, 1959, she describes the General Assembly Elections Bill, which was subsequently introduced on the recommendation of the British representative and subsequently ignoring the women's suffrage. She described it as, and I quote, a slap in the face to Bahamian women as it denies women their rights. She concluded by saying that she would continue to fight until her voice is hushed by death. And the fight continued for 2 more years, joining forces with sisters all over the world and with delegations of suffragettes traveling to the United Kingdom to state the cause, and a campaign of continued organized lobbying and pressure and protests. The Progressive Liberal Party coalesced its support for this movement. Finally, victory was won when the enabling and groundbreaking legislation was introduced into the House and passed on the 23rd of February 1961, and which vested in women the right to vote and indeed instituted universal adult suffrage. Today, we remember with a heart full of gratitude Dame Doris Johnson and all of the indomitable leaders of the suffragette movement, including Mary Ingram, Georgiana Simonet, Eugenia Lockhart, Bertha Isaacs, Althea Hyler, Althea Mortimer, Mabel Walker, and the many thousands of women who joined the movement and were unrelenting, and who showed up in full force on Election Day, 60 years on the 26th of this month. And as women have in every general election and by-election and local government election ever since that day. These women came from diverse backgrounds and were of disparate political affiliations and were some instances as different as could be. but they found a common fiery place of intense sisterhood and joined forces to fight for women to be recognized as full citizens and to demand the right to vote. These are our precious foremothers. In truth, the fight was deeper and larger than the franchise. It spoke to the fundamental questions of the inherent humanity of women, to their aspirations, to their vital expressions on life's journey, to their fundamental rights as human beings. It was an outright challenge to the status quo and a major assault upon the prevailing archaic stereotypes. But 26th of November, 1962 was not the end of a road. It was the wide opening of an uncharted potentiality. That victory, which resulted in women by the thousands going to the polls, was to have enduring and far-reaching effects for the social and economic progress of the Bahamian people and towards our patriotic ethos. There is still ground to be possessed. We will continue to fight, for example, for the right of women in every instance to pass citizenship to the children of their womb. In this gallery, joining us for this solemn occasion is an array of distinguished women, former parliamentarians who are the tangible expression of women obtaining the franchise. That is, the full participation in the political process all the way to be seated within these walls. But also seated throughout this House and in the Senate are scores of women, the names of which you have recognized, Madam Speaker. And of that era, I give particular recognition to Dame Marguerite Pindling, who would have been and there are some who are the descendants of the suffragettes who are here with us today. And so, Madam Speaker, Madam President, as we were reminded by the Senate chaplain, when she reminded us that when all is said and done, we must declare, thanks be to God. It is my honor to so move.
Yes.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder?
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Dr. Lucia Hepburn Forbes.
Mr. Speaker and members of the Honorable House of Assembly, allow me. Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, today, invincible womanhood, mother of men and ruler of the world, rises her noble head and approaches the court of justice with the clarion call for equal rights for all Bahamian women. These were the salient words echoed by Dame Doris Johnson as she stood soliciting support for the women's suffrage movement in the Bahamas. Madam President and Speaker, I rise today to second this historic motion. As I stand thankfully on the shoulders of females that had the fortitude and resilience and built the foundation that afforded me and every other female in these hallowed halls so many opportunities. Today, ladies, I am elated as we are making history. Madams, please permit me a brief leeway to thank the Prime Minister and other ministers for bringing this historic resolution, along with civic organizations. I would like to send special thanks to Dr. Christopher Curry, Mrs. Lisa Major, Mrs. Yuli LaFleur, Mrs. Margaret McKay, Mrs. Marian Bethel, Mrs. Francine Butler Watson, and the Honorable Glennis Hanna Martin, who, without their insight, research, and recollection, this presentation would not be possible. It is commonly stated that the health of the nation is the wealth of a nation. Allow me to add that the mind of the nation is only developed through proper education. Dr. Christopher Curry, in his article, Women's Suffrage, explains that many of the leading suffragists acquired valuable leadership training, organizational skills, and political acumen in pro-political organizations such as churches, lodges, friendly societies, long before the emergence of a formal suffrage movement in the 1950s. Madams, therefore, it is clear that the theme of education and enlightenment is one that is intertwined in the women's suffrage movement and one that still guides us to this day. And each day is a new day and a new opportunity for us to enhance the educational enterprise of our society. CAFNO researchers express that education gives children and youth the knowledge and skills they need to face daily life challenges and take advantage of economic and lifelong learning opportunities. Education happens to be a key driver for reducing poverty, fostering economic growth, and achieving social development. It also provides stable structure and hope for a future. Coupled with the statements by Dame Johnson, which reads, "Today, women have, by force of circumstance, taken on increasing responsibility to ensure the proper development and growth of our homes, our children, our social institutions. Bahamian women have risen to give outstanding leadership services in business activities, welfare work, home and school organizations. Suffragists faced failure of the government to give women to vote meant that there was a need to educate the government to become progressive and democratic. Madam President and Speaker, the founding mothers understood that the lack of education would lead to the deterioration of the social construct, the most important one, the family. And while few of these ladies had extensive formal education, they understood that education and learning is developed and come from all forms of activities. Madams, please permit me to provide a brief overview of the educational attainments of a few of our celebrated suffragists, with the majority of information coming from UB Libraries on Suffrages. This is why this is important. I did a survey before putting the speech together, and out of asking 52 persons under the age of 45, only 2 people could name me names of suffragists. Yes. The 3 I will focus on are Mrs. Mabel Cordelia Holloway Walker, Mrs. Althame Mortimer, and Dame Doris Johnson. I will be honest, madams, and indicate that I chose these 3 females because of the significant ways they also touch my family lives. Mrs. Walker, an American by birth, studied at Howard University, where she obtained her Bachelor's of Art degree and completed relocation to the Bahamas. She became involved in education by opening a preschool and assisting her husband with adult education classes at the Bahamas Technical Institute, which he organized. Several of my family friends and family members later attended this institute, which provided them with various real-world skills. Later, Mrs. Walker became a teacher with the Board of Education at Southern Preparatory School, then Western Senior, where my father attended, and other family members. She also taught at junior schools. Mrs. Walker was promoted to head mistress of Woodcock Primary School, a post she held until her retirement in 1962. On June 23, 1962, the Nassau Herald noted that Mrs. M. Walker returned to Nassau after a trip to the United Kingdom, where she attended the board meeting of International Alliance of Women in London. President of the Bahamas Women's Suffrage Movement, a member of the alliance, Ms. Walker was the first woman in the Western Hemisphere to be elected to that board. Ms. Walker was also the founding president of the Bahamas Union of Teachers in 1947, the first woman to head a trade union in the Bahamas. That's inspiring, ladies. From this, she inspired my aunt, Margaret Hepburn McKay, to be the co-founder of the Bahamas Financial Services Union and the Bahamas Financial Services Management Union. Madams, this is a testament of how each and every one of us touch people's lives in ways that we may not even know. Our words and actions inspire and allow others to aspire to be the best they can be, even if they only know us for brief moments. Madams, allow me to continue my brief overview of these ladies. The second suffragist, Althea Mortimer, who moved to Nassau at an early age and entered the government school system. By the age of 12, she had completed all of the available education to her, but she stayed on as a teacher's aide for several years. Ms. Mortimer then traveled to New York to take up evening classes and opened up a typing and shorthand school in 1947 in a residence on Meeting Street. She started out with a few students and 2 typewriters, but over a period of approximately 40 years, students benefited from her teaching, including Dame Ivy Dumont, former Governor General. She also taught 2 of my aunts at her school, Margaret and Leonie, who went on to both have very successful careers in their chosen fields. Madam Speaker and President, former Prime Minister Sir Lyndon Pinland presented Ms. Mortimer with a plaque naming her the Woman of the Year for her achievements as a commercial educator. Ms. Mortimer passionately believed in the support for the rights of women to vote. She helped to draft and type several of the documents created by the women's suffrage movement to further their cause in the halls of Parliament. She was also the guest speaker at Education for Citizenship, a seminar designated by the leaders of the women's suffrage movement to prepare Bahamian women to assume their political responsibilities. Dr. Christopher Curry, in his article about women's suffrage, showcases Althea Mortimer's belief in the need for education in a speech given at Rehart Hotel, where he highlighted the importance of education in the development of good citizenry. For Mortimer, not only was education essential to the development of an intelligent and articulate citizen, but she believed that it was necessary for good governments. Echoing Mortimer's sentiments was Mabel Walker, who, in bringing the vote of thanks that evening, reminded the audience once more that it is essential to have a literate electorate in a democratic country. Thus, it appears that suffragists did not simply agitate for voting rights, but instead advocated constitutional changes so that they would become a part of the educated and informed citizens prepared to engage as equal partners with their male counterparts in the process of nation building. It is evident that these ladies, as young people like to say, understood the assignment. Dame Doris Johnson can be called a teacher, suffragette, politician, and author. It is evident that she is a woman who was driven, full of intelligence and ambition, and committed to achieving her goals against all odds. She lived close to my grandaunt, Rose Hall King, who was also my dad's godmother. My dad, who lived further down Mason's Addition, would recall them meeting in May Courtyard discussing political matters as he was a little boy. When Dame Doris Johnson returned to the Bahamas from studying abroad, the women's suffrage movement embraced her passion and skills. She was able to mobilize the movement into a fighting force. My cousin Ina Hepburn, also inspired by the movement, had my dad and aunts handing out flyers to support the cause. Madam Speaker and President, When the 1962 general election was held, Dr. Johnson became the first woman to ever contest the seat. She ran for the Eleuthera district, but did not win. But she had run the first leg of a race that would be completed by Dame Janet Bosquet some 20 years later. In 1967, the PLP became the government, and Dr. Johnson became the first woman appointed to the Senate, the first woman leader of government business in the Senate, the first minister of the government, and the first woman president of the Senate. We are a people of firsts. These are just a few of the suffragist ladies that laid the foundation for every lady in this honorable house. Whether directly or indirectly, these ladies were focused on the future of our country and how they could ensure that the Bahamas would be a better place for all. These and others allowed other ladies like the Reverend Dr. Cynthia Pratt, Mrs. Keva Bethel, and Dame Ivy Dumont to promote and pursue education and politics. Madam Speaker and President, there were several women that forged the way and encouraged educational growth and attainment. Too many for me to speak at my allotted time. According to the International Federation for Family Development, females in particular bear the primary responsibility for the education and socialization of children, as well as instilling values of citizenship and belonging in society. Families provide material and non-material care and support to its members, from children to older persons or those suffering from illness. Females have always been at the forefront of children's education. It has been stated that a mother's involvement helps to extend the teaching beyond the classroom. This creates a more positive learning experience for children and allows children to perform better in school. It also establishes their confidence and ability. We all know the African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child, and every village needs a chief. And the reality in our country is that the chief is normally the mother in the home. Madams, we must ensure that we continue the movement. We have to. We must ensure that we tackle the major issues. I only speak in the reality. It is. We must. We must ensure that ladies continue to fight for the major issues of climate change, inclusion, diversity, persons with disabilities, and education. Unfortunately, if you were in a wheelchair, you could not come and be a part of this historic event today. But like Madam Speaker say, a new day is here, and a new parliamentary building is soon on its way. In closing, Madam President and Speaker, without these women, not only the ones that I have given a brief description, but all of these powerful women in this gallery, they are beacons of light, charting the way for all females, educating and showing us that females can accomplish anything that they set their mind to. On this historic day, with both a female speaker and a president, I second and support this historic resolution. May God bless each and every one of you, and may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you. Before we proceed with our order of business, I would like to draw attention back to the gallery, where we have sitting the first female who registered to vote in the person of the Honorable Ruby Ann Cooper Darling. Thank you so much. It would also be remiss of me if I did not recognize former parliamentarian, the Honorable Melanie Griffin, both she and her mother, former Senator Talita Strawn, now deceased, played a pivotal role in women in politics today. I would also like to recognize former President of the Senate, the Honorable Mildred Hall, who's also here with us today. With that said, it has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed. Whereas the Parliament of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, on behalf of the Bahamas, recognize, honor, and salute Mrs. Mary Ingram, Mrs. Eugenia Lockhart, Ms. Georgiana K. Simonet, Mrs. Mabel Walker, and Dame Doris Johnson, God-fearing women who, in their quest for justice and equity for all Bahamians, established and led the women's suffrage movement with the support of other women. Be it therefore resolved that the Parliament and people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas do honor, recognize, and forever celebrate the vision and courage of the leaders and members of the women's suffrage movement, their contribution to the enfranchisement, universal suffrage, and social and political change in the Bahamas. This 60th anniversary of the enfranchisement of women and the continued work and contribution of women in and to the Bahamas. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Golden Gates.
Madam Speaker, Madam President, I rise in honor of the excellence embodied by Bahamian women. Any day is a good day to celebrate the accomplishments of Bahamian women, but today we are dedicating this time to focus solely on women. I'm here to talk about Bahamian women in business and the professions. As a woman who has launched multiple entrepreneurial ventures throughout my career, while also working for various organizations, I am well aware of the difficulties of trying to make it in the corporate world or succeed as a woman entrepreneur. It is difficult for everyone, but a woman has extra degrees of difficulty in navigating patriarchal structures that weren't originally designed to empower and uplift us. Bahamian women still find a way to prosper despite it all. Madam Speaker, fortunately for business-minded women like me, the Bahamas is a country where there has been a visible progress when it comes to the entrepreneurial and career prospects of women. In various industries, we have women we can look up to and role models whose examples we can follow. When we look at the public sector, we look at the direction the statistics are headed in the private sector, and we see a trend is emerging, Madam Speaker. I don't want to discredit the contributions of our male counterparts by saying we run things. But Madam Speaker, Bahamian women run things. As we take these huge leaps and bounds forward, we are breaking glass ceilings, wooden ceilings, concrete ceilings, metal ceilings, every ceiling. We are breaking them all. We will not be satisfied until every barrier of inequality is shattered and true equality is seen at every level, from the CEO to the office of the Prime Minister. Yes. With the momentum on our side, there can be no doubt that we will see Bahamian women have equal representation at the highest levels of our society. I believe I will see this future in my lifetime. As we move towards this future, let's remember the giants, both past and present, who've paved the way. Within this very Parliament, we have Her Excellency, Leslie Miller Bryce, who played an integral role in building and managing a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Among former parliamentarians, we have the unstoppable Alison Maynard Gibson, a member of not just a political dynasty, but a business dynasty and a top-notch businesswoman and attorney. Speaking of political dynasties within the public health system, one of our brightest stars is Dr. Indira Martin, daughter of the member for Engliston. Madam Speaker, they say her genius as a scientist matches her mother's genius as a leader and a politician. Of course, although this is not my topic today, as the Minister of State for the Public Service, I would briefly like to note the wonderful women leaders we have within the public service. There are some times when we characterize the public service as being behind the times or slow to progress. But I want people to understand that the most progressive sector for career advancement and equal representation of women in the Bahamas is the public sector. Of course, this is not to imply that there are not Bahamian women bosses in the private sector, because we are definitely representing there too. Madam Speaker, I would like to name a few trailblazing, nation-building women who have made their contributions through businesses and the professions. I know that this is not an exhaustive list. Not even an entire day could finally fulfill the names of persons and great businesswomen who hail from our nation. However, in the spirit of celebrating the greatness of Bahamian women, I would like to highlight a few of those great women. I start with tourism and aviation. There is Bernice Joaquin, CEO of the Nassau Airport Development Company and former Director General of Tourism, and Joy Jirbulu, another former Director General of Tourism. There's Karen Carey, Senior HR Vice President at Atlantis. And I must mention Yolanda DeVoe, Regional Vice President at Mandara Spa at Atlantis, who served as an early mentor to me and gave me my start in human resources and labor relations. In financial services, our second largest industry, we have Pauline Allen Dean, the first woman to become manager of a commercial bank and the first woman to serve as managing director of a commercial bank. She also served as president of the Bahamas Institute of Bankers. Antoinette Russell, former director at Credit Suisse and former non-executive director at Winterbotham Trust, who is now the CEO of her own corporate services, compliance, and human capital solutions firm. Of course, we cannot talk about financial services without mentioning Dr. Tanya McCartney, CEO and Executive Director of the Financial Services Board, and her immediate predecessor, who is now a partner at Graham Thompson, Aaliyah Allen. In law and business, there is Sharon Lady Wilson and her daughters, Charlene and Roselle, who follow perfectly in her footsteps of business and legal. In fashion and beauty, there is Brenda Knowles of the Fashion Group and Dr. Zelrona Mackey, who come to mind as women who have forged pathways while pouring into the lives of young mentees such as me in passing on their creative craft and industry knowledge. There's Laura Williams, my constituent, who is known as a consistent, self-made entrepreneur in the produce vendor business. As for SMEs, we have so many, but I would like to particularly highlight girl bosses such as Blair Percenti and Deandra Sawyer of Bryland, Candace Cargill of the Little Pink Party, Flower Girl Bahamas, and KVRH, Makiva Wallace of Buttons Formal Wear, the Bahamas Bridal Show, Azure Aviation, and Willow Events Bahamas, Pat Mortimer of the Pat Moore Group, Patricia Brown Chatty and her daughter, Singular, of Charmonet Group of Companies, and Mitzi Turnquest of the Signature Group of Companies and Isbeth Magnet School. If we are mentioning women who have built large successful businesses, there is Erla Bethel, the president and chief executive of Dan Brad Limited, the parent company of the local McDonald's franchise. We must mention Nancy Kelly, president of Kelly's Home Center, who built Kelly's into the Mecca it is today. And Kay Gardner of the international award-winning Zaymar Group of Companies and the Music Project. We must also highlight Judy Monroe, the first woman to become president of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and the first woman to serve as the Ecumenical Cooperative Society in the Netherlands and Antilles. She was also the CEO and president of Caribbean Bottling Company. We must mention past Chamber of Commerce presidents Lorraine Fraser and Tanya Wright. There's also Crystal Rutherford Ferguson, the first woman to serve as chairman of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employers Confederation. We must celebrate the late Dr. Keva Bethel in her role as the president of the College of the Bahamas. A friend and the late Cindy Williams Ramming, who also served as senior vice president of Pickett Foods Limited, and the late business leader, Gaydeen McLean, a savvy businesswoman who has passed on but continues to have a profound impact on my life. In the new generation, we have Rexy Roll, VP of Operations at Western Air, who has been recognized internationally as a black female executive. When it comes to international recognition, Madam Speaker, Aisha Bose stands out as a great Bahamian aerospace engineer who is the founder and CEO of the award-winning advisory firm STEM Board. Throughout her entire life, Aisha has shot for the moon, and now her efforts will see her become the first Bahamian to enter outer space in an upcoming space flight. Speaking of women in STEM, we must recognize Melanie Roach, the first Bahamian woman to become a civil engineer and the first woman director of public works. Sonia Brown is another giant in engineering as the principal of leading firm Graphite Engineering and a past president of the Bahamas Society of Engineers. There are so many names to recognize, Madam Speaker, like Donna Lang Jones, a top real estate broker of Keys Realty out of Grand Bahama. There's Deborah Baston of Dundastown, Abaco, the best yet bakery. Larice Dames and Veronica Marshall in Exuma. Dr. Jillian Bethel, CEO of OKX Bahamas and founder of CryptoWire. International top-level executive and founder of Star Apple Women's Empowerment nonprofit, Mildred Murphy, and so many more. So like I said, Madam Speaker, not even an entire day could begin to contain the amazing women who hail from the Bahamas. We're fortunate enough to still have many of our trailblazers with us today. But there's still time for us to learn from their wisdom firsthand and carry on their legacies of fearless excellence and determined grace. May God bless those who are still here, and may He preserve the loved ones of those who have passed on. Today, we stand in solidarity as women, as Bahamians, to honor the legacies of great women whose shoulders we lean on, great women whose shoulders we stand on, as we all strive to build a better Bahamas for all Bahamians. God bless our beautiful Commonwealth, and thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Wonderful presentation. Asmini? The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Pine Ridge.
Madam Speaker and colleagues of this Honorable House, Madam President and honorable members of the Senate, good morning. I am humbled and truly honored to rise in this honorable place on this momentous occasion to represent the beautiful people of Pine Ridge and to join in recognition of this historic achievement for women in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Today, we celebrate the 60th anniversary of the day that women voted for the first time in our beloved country. As a Bahamian woman, born and raised in the quaint settlement of 8 Mile Rock, Grand Bahama, I am so privileged to be standing here today as a member of Parliament to represent my people, our people, a defining moment for the women in this place that began 60 years ago. Madam Speaker, Madam President, it is because of the women's suffrage movement in the Bahamas that we are here today, standing on the shoulders of those brave, relentless suffragists who agitated for the rights of women in the Bahamas to cast their vote equal to men. It is because of the women's suffrage movement in the Bahamas that I, Ginger Maria Davis Moxie, and thousands of Bahamian women have risen to places like this honorable chamber, in executive boardrooms throughout our country, in the classrooms, on the basketball court, in spacecrafts, in our churches, and throughout our communities. We have arrived with voices that will not be silenced. And we will be relentless in our pursuit to continue the political and socioeconomic empowerment of Bahamian women and to support full and equal participation in decision-making at all levels. It was Elizabeth Cady Stanton, human rights activist and one of the trailblazers of suffragettes movement, who said, "The best protection any woman can have is courage." And it is because of our foremothers, Mabel Walker, Mary Ingram, Georgiana Simonette, Eugenia Lockhart, Dame Doris Johnson, and the countless women and men who supported their fight for civil rights and a democratic society that we, the generations of Bahamian women who followed, were able to have voices louder than our predecessors to speak against injustice without fear of retaliation. Madam Speaker, Madam President, it is because of Ruby Ann Cooper Darling, the first woman who registered to vote in the Bahamas on the 12th of July, 1962, and who proudly cast her vote on the 26th of November that same year, that thousands of Bahamian women can freely and boldly go to the polls to exercise their democratic right. The tenacity of those women who came before has afforded me and every female parliamentarian, past and present, the opportunity to stand in this honorable house, never forgetting that we stand on the broad shoulders of Dame Doris Johnson, a woman who had the audacity to contest a seat in the Eleuthera district during the 1962 election, the first woman to ever do so, proving that she was equal to any male candidate. And although she did not win, her electoral run opened the door to her political career, creating an impressive legacy. Madam Speaker, Madam President, these women tilled the proverbial soil and fought with every fiber of their being to prepare and fertilize the ground for an inclusive, progressive Bahamas. Madam Speaker, Madam President, 60 years later, the Bahamas has added the names of many women who supported and have continued the work began by the suffragists. First and foremost, we salute and pay tribute to the Right Honorable Dame Janet Bostwick, the first woman to serve in this Honorable House of Assembly, first woman to serve as acting Prime Minister, and the first woman to serve as Attorney General. Dame Janet, we salute you. We honor the achievements of a lady who has taken me under her wings, my mentor, Deputy to the Governor General, Cynthia Mother Pratt, the first woman to be appointed as the Deputy Prime Minister of the Bahamas, the first woman to serve as the Minister of National Security, and a decorated community builder. Mother Pratt, we salute you. We recognize today, Madam Speaker, Madam President, that we have the highest number of women representatives in the House of Assembly in the history of our country, led by Madam Engliston, Mother of the House, Elizabeth, Golden Gates, Marathon, Seabreeze, yours truly, Pine Ridge, and Madam Speaker, member for Bamboo Town, this is your house. You run this house. Madam President, you also lead the Senate of our country, where 4 of our Bahamian women are represented. Madam Speaker, Madam President, along with these notable glass ceiling breaking women, on behalf of the women in this place, I salute and give special recognition to some trailblazing, extraordinary women of Grand Bahama Island. Women like Cynthia Donaldson, an unsung hero who quietly supported the suffrage movement. Mrs. Donaldson recounts that she would attend the political meetings at the Lodge Hall with other women listening intently in the background. She voted in 1962 election, and at that time, she was the only black woman employed at the Labor Board, and the first black woman to be promoted as an assistant labor officer with responsibility for the employment exchange, which had just begun assisting Bahamians with finding jobs. With only an 8th grade education, Mrs. Donaldson and 7 other Bahamian women went on to earn qualifications in shorthand and typing at the Teachers Training College to become secretaries for cabinet ministers, positions which were not occupied by black Bahamians. Throughout her career, she continued her efforts to ensure Bahamian women were qualified and employed for positions other than kitchen workers and housekeepers. Madam Speaker, Madam President, we salute community builder, the late Lucille Mama Lou Adderley. Mama Lou was an activist who cared deeply for the children in the Hawksbill community. She combated hunger by creating her very own feeding program for children attending the Hawksbill Primary School, where she was a lunch vendor. She operated a small convenience store in the community to feed families and hosted the children to Christmas plays and parties on her front porch, where they were treated to a Christmas dinner every year, served by 2 of her famous friends in the entertainment industry, comedians the late Red Fox and Flip Wilson. Mama Lou was special and made a significant contribution to improving the quality of life for residents in the Hawksbill community. We also salute Elma Smith-Hanner, who earned a gold medal in the 1975 Carifta Track and Field Games in Bermuda for discus, and again in 1976, Carifta Track and Field Games in Nassau, which were the first ever regional competition on track and field to be held in the Bahamas, breaking the record she had in Bermuda. We salute attorney Willie Moss, who happens to be the sister of the Right Honorable Dame Janet Bostwick. Willie Moss was the first woman to serve at the highest level at the Grandmama Port Authority, as president, as deputy chairman, and as general counsel. Willie Moss broke many barriers and paved the way for many of us in business on Grand Bahama Island. We salute you, Willie Moss. We salute noted attorney Constance McDonald, our first woman QC, now Casey, of Grand Bahama Island. And in politics on Grand Bahama Island, we have trailblazing women who have served our people like former members of parliament. We salute Pine Ridge very own Ann Pacenti Russell, also Pleasant Bridgewater, Renee Grant, and Pakeisha Parker Edgecombe. We recognize Senators Naomi Seymour, Geneva Rutherford, Tanisha Tynes, Catherine Forbes Smith, and Jasmine Darius. Veteran educators like the late, great Mama Blue Jay Sandra Edgecombe and warrior Anita Doherty. My favorite principal, Dorothy Lightbourne, and others like Mary Cooper, the late Violet Lenore Russell Wildgoose, Sister Mary Patricia Russell, Sister Nadine Russell, Udell Roberts, and Catherine McIntosh. Sports icons like WNBA superstar Jonquel Jones, Olympians Joanna Evans, and Alana Dillette. University basketball coach Yolette McPhee McEwen, who happens to be here now in Nassau with her team playing in a prestigious tournament. Our old-time favorite meteorologist, the late great Donna Duncombe, or the comforting voice we all looked forward to listening during hurricanes, Diana Swan. And in business, the first Bahamian to obtain a business license in the city of Freeport from the Grand Bahama Port Authority, businesswoman, the late great Eva Schaffner. Madam Speaker and Madam President, if anyone knows the story of Freeport, then we can all appreciate that this was a big deal. We also salute a giant in the real estate industry, Hillary Jones, and tourism pioneer, Irma Grant Smith. And in the church, where do I even begin, where there are so many names to mention? But we recognize the contributions of trailblazing women like Reverend Agatha Martin, Apostle Dr. Rita Stewart, Evangelist Lottie Mabel Russell, and the late Evangelist Mary Jones. Trailblazing business women like the ladies of N&A, the world's best chicken in the bag. Sisters Naomi Stewart and Albertha Roll. And not to forget Sister Elta Roll of Praise the Lord, and Miss Ferline Lightbourne in Sea Grape, known for the best bread in the Bahamas. And Miss Malvy's and Miss Julia's Snack Shop in Jonestown, all trailblazing women from my hometown in the Rocks. Madam Speaker and Madam President, it is the names of those unsung heroic acts by the many women in our community that particularly move me. The ones who go about their everyday life, giving back, building up communities, past and present. The ones who go unnoticed, who are the backbone of their households, who keep holding it down in good times and bad. Women like Big Mama in Heritage, and Ms. Dolores, Ms. Jenny, and Ms. Burrows, who unselfishly give of themselves to community. The supporting cast of women who are known to make things happen, but do it without fanfare, and quite frankly, many times without thanks. We applaud you. The people salute you. To all of the women throughout our family islands, thank you on behalf of the women and men in this place for all that you continue to do in service to our people and our country. We salute you. And we all know that there are so many women who have made inroads paving the way for us to be where we are today. Women like my mother, Preslita Van Smith, who took care of 4 children with the support of my grandmother, Manvella Lewis Smith, after my father was killed at the age of 8. They both raised a little girl who won a scholarship at the age of 12, didn't have funds for books and uniforms, got on a bus and went downtown Freeport to ask for a job. Started working during summer and Christmas breaks, went on to become vice president, left to work in her passion for helping people as a social entrepreneur and a nonprofit, and is today the Member of Parliament for Pine Ridge and the first female minister for Grand Bahama. Hats off to the women behind the scenes that go unnoticed, the real heroes in making it happen. Madam Speaker and Madam President, you are both trailblazers as you continue the journey that Rome Italia Johnson and Dame Doris Johnson began many years ago. And we all know that it is the many unsung heroes that have made it possible for us to do what we do, for us to pay it forward for the next generation, for us to remember from whence we came, for us to utilize every moment, every opportunity, every chance to do what is right for our people, to better the lives of our people. Madam Speaker and Madam President, again, I am, as we all are, humbled to stand on the shoulders of those heroic suffragists who refuse to be held back in their quest to ensure that women from every nook and cranny of the Bahamas could hold their heads up high. This celebration of the 60th anniversary provides a unique opportunity for us to challenge ourselves to create an even more embracive environment to bring our young women along with us. We need to bust that welcoming door wide open and allow greater opportunities for our young girls to also become advocates for our people. They need our support. So to our women in leadership, 2 simple questions. Who are you mentoring now? What program are you spearheading to impact the lives of women and girls in your community now? This is the clarion call today. We should all identify a cause that continues the work of the suffragists with tenacity, determination, courage, relentless resolve, and unwavering commitment for the advancement of women in our country. Let us continue to be a voice, write the vision and make it clear, use our hands to work and pay it forward for future generations of women and men. In the words of Maya Angelou, develop enough courage so that you can stand up for yourself and then stand up for somebody else. Pine Ridge congratulates the members of this House and the members of the Senate for recognizing this historic occasion, the 60th anniversary of the day that women first voted in the Bahamas, in such a very special way. God bless you all, and may He continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many
chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Maxine C.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you to Madam Speaker for the kind invitation to my colleagues and me to join you in this honorable place. Madam President, competence and capability are not influenced by gender. Women are equally as proficient as men are. Social constructs continue to be the challenge. For centuries, women have been steered towards certain careers. This gender stereotyping has produced countless women in select fields, while other industries have been void of femininity. Societal pigeonholing has limited doors of opportunity for women, but thankfully, times have changed and are changing, especially in maritime and aviation. To be clear, Madam President, women in maritime and aviation have always been part of the stories. They were just not part of the narrative. The human body has many parts, all of which are important. This same concept is applicable in maritime, aviation, and other areas where women have played a major role in creating a viable sector. Women were always the ones behind the scenes executing for the men. They have worked in supporting roles while men were cast in the leading roles. But women in maritime and aviation have expanded their horizons to sail the ocean blue and fly high, commanding their crafts with utmost esteem. Women across our islands, Madam President, continue to rise to the challenge of leadership, daily demonstrating their capacity to think critically and make sound decisions. In maritime, women are creating waves, rising above challenges, and coming together to achieve a better Bahamas. Traditionally regarded as a male-dominated sector, the maritime industry focuses on the conservation, sustainability, protection of the world's oceans, seas, marine resources, along with the safety of vessel activity, labor laws at sea, and a myriad of other marine-related concerns. As a woman, I understand all too well the difficulties we face in our quest to be better represented in all spheres. But I remain hopeful today as I acknowledge the progress that has been made. Within our beloved country, women are maritime lawyers and law-related professionals, accountants, registrars, engineers, enforcement officers, ship captains, environmentalists, and inspectors, to name a few, and are contributing to the industry's development. At age 17, Madam President, one Shantae Pearson spent 11 months, almost a full year, on a bulk cargo ship as the only female and youngest member of the crew. For 3 days, she endured the roughest seas imaginable, eventually graduating from LJM Academy before moving on to Caribbean Maritime Academy in Jamaica, where she not only graduated, but graduated top of her class, eventually filling a high-ranking role with Royal Caribbean on her completion. 3 women have headed the transportation sector in our country at the ministerial level, Madam President, including my dear beloved mentor, the late Honorable Teresa Moxie Ingram, who was the first woman to hold the post. The Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin, who introduced the Bahamas Maritime Cadet Corps and the development of a national maritime policy, and the member for Elizabeth, the Honorable Minister JoBeth Colby Davis, who now serves along with a team of leaders, many of whom are women. These women work together to make the Bahamas a well-regulated maritime hub which promotes safety, maximizes the blue economy in a sustainable way, and provides opportunities for all Bahamians to partake in. Women maritime attorneys include Marlette Johnson, Sinisha Boodle, Kenya Nottage, and Melissa Wright. Madam Justice J. Denise Lewis Johnson was the first woman to serve as the chair of the Bahamas Maritime Authority Board, a role Ms. Jacqueline Simmons now holds. You see, Madam President, once a good justice demonstrated the exceptional capabilities of womanhood, there was no turning back. Ms. Lorna Bethel is currently the youngest serving Assistant Port Controller of the Bahamas and a PhD candidate in maritime affairs. Madam President, we have Natalia Johnson, who is a tugboat captain at Cotug Seabulk Maritime in Freeport, Grand Bahama. Bahamian Ivana Seymour has been a chief officer with Royal Caribbean since 2019, Madam President, and Dr. Rihanna Neely Murphy is the director of the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection, which goes hand in hand with maritime. Dr. Brenda Clare, Madam President, has a PhD in mathematics and serves with distinction as president of LJM Maritime Academy. Madam President, there are so many other Bahamians and Bahamian women in particular who are out there excelling in maritime. We must support LJM's vision to work with urgency alongside the Bahamas Maritime Authority in developing a comprehensive directory of Bahamians in the field. Madam President, the job of an airplane pilot is to lift a flying vessel off the ground tens of thousands of feet in the air, take it from one place to another, and then safely put it back on the ground again. What makes this job critical is the direct impact it can have on the most supreme commodity, life itself. The pilot and team of individuals who provide support to the pilot make up the aviation industry. No skyscraper in the world could offer the office view that pilots earn. The job is a complex one, and the training is extensive. Madam President, this is not one of those it's who you know jobs. You can't finesse your way through the training. Can't finesse your way through the training. The license comes with the understanding that a pilot can be entrusted with human lives. Like maritime, aviation is and always has been male-dominated in the Bahamas and around the world. Although women have always worked in the industry, organizing reservations, ticketing customers, and in other capacities, there were no Bahamian female pilots until Patrice Washington, nee Clark, took the leap. Bahamian airline pilot Patrice Washington was the first black woman graduate of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. She was the first professional woman pilot hired by Bahamas Air, the first woman captain of a major U.S. air service, and first Bahamian female pilot hired by UPS to fly their cargo jets. Madam President, her firsts are up there with the Honorable Dame here. You see, a Bahamian woman is not only in our history books, but in the history books of the United States of America as well. Three decades after Washington, on May 22, 2012, Frances Smith, Gwendolyn Ritchie, and Gail Saunders simultaneously became the first female captains of Bahamas Air Dash 8 aircrafts. That's right. Madam President, not one, not two, but three Bahamian mothers became the first female captains of all time in the Bahamas. Captain, they tell me, Madam President, is the highest rank in aviation. I found a commonality among these three captains other than motherhood. It is that they all knew exactly what they wanted to do at a young age. Passion drove these three educated women to the top of their field. On Ragged Island, Captain Gwendolyn would look forward to the regular trips made by doctors where she would get to know the pilots and planes coming in. Captain Gail Saunders would watch the planes take off and land on Sundays at the airport with her family. On Long Island, Captain Frances Smith would watch planes fly by her home on a daily basis, to the point, Madam President, where she knew the name of almost every aircraft that flew by. The three women not only knew their calling, but they sought visual representations of where they wanted to be. Sometimes it's important to see a vision. Like these ladies, Madam President, I knew from 10th grade that I wanted to be a parliamentarian. I saw myself standing here making a contribution 30 years ago, and here I am today. Madam President, this only shows that with determination and hard work, we can achieve our goals. Madam President, Captain Frances Smith was a full-time employee at Kelly's, and we reference that that business has been built by a great Bahamian business person. And Captain Frances Smith, she trained as a pilot part-time on the side, as we would say in the Bahamas, putting in time with whatever spare cash she had. The license normally takes 3 months to complete. It took her 7 years, but she was determined and continuously worked hard. Madam President, one of Western Air's first female captains, Laurie Johnson, is in Dubai right now, working as a first officer and the first female Bahamian pilot at Fly Dubai Airlines. Madam President, the sky is no longer the limit. Let's work to ensure that in years to come, more Bahamian women meet worldwide demands for pilots and close the gap between males and females within the industry. Madam President, pilots make great heroes, but there are also outstanding women excelling in other areas of aviation. Allow me to highlight 2 of them. In 1994, Jacqueline Monroe became the first female to obtain the Aircraft Dispatcher Certificate from the Federal Aviation Administration. Jacqueline now works as a safety inspector, where she deals with safety management systems. Her job is even as critical as that of a pilot. She has to assess and manage risks. She has to put precautions in place to avoid tragedy. She has to find ways to minimize any and all errors. Madam President, Bernice Walking, who is our country's first female Director General of Tourism, is another Bahamian woman who has made an impact on the industry. She currently serves as the President and Chief Executive Officer at NAD, Nassau Airport Development Company. And Madam President, as we know, NAD is the operator of Lynden Pindling International Airport, our country's busiest airport, as it sits on New Providence Island. A woman, Madam President, has responsibility for all aspects of LPIA and is assisted by an executive team consisting of 3 females and 2 males. Perhaps one day, women will make up the higher percentile of the executives in other maritime and aviation-related institutions. Madam President, global transport accounts for the majority of international trade, and the United Nations has issued a charge to steer more women and girls toward this future. We must learn from those who are paving the way and create new, innovative ideas and opportunities that will transform the sectors into environmentally sustainable, safe, and inclusive disciplines. Of note, so many of the women who have excelled in maritime and aviation were influenced in their childhood and youth. I want to emphasize that for parents, teachers, family, and friends of Bahamian girls, it is important to expose and instill a can-do attitude in our future generation of maritime and aviation experts. According to Shantae Pearson, who now sails the world on Royal Caribbean, her dad, now a retired Royal Bahamas Defense Force officer, would allow her to accompany him when the ship was in the harbor, and he would explain everything to her, Madam President. When Patrice Clark Washington took her first flight at age 5, aviation piqued her interest. Of course, she initially aspired to be a stewardess, but her destiny far exceeded her dreams. Aisha Bowe, of whom we are all proud, is a Bahamian American aerospace engineer, founder and CEO of a technology company. She is a real-life rocket scientist, Madam President. Aisha's guidance counselor tried to steer her towards a more, gender stereotypical career in cosmetology, which I'm sure she would have been great at. But Madam President, her father's intervention and recommendation that she took a math class, which she aced, set the foundation for her to transfer into engineering programs. Parliamentarians in this place, along with the mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, godparents of Bahamian daughters across this archipelago, from Grand Bahama in the north to Inagua in the south. And I am speaking to myself as well, Madam President. Please, 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 I beg you, let's purchase toy airplanes, helicopters, spacecrafts, ships, and calculators for our precious girls to play with. Enough with the dolls and makeup and teddy bears. There's nothing wrong with unicorns and rainbows, but we need to condition our girls towards careers in maritime and aviation. We need to empower them, Madam President. Madam President, we need to empower them to dream big and go far. If they are called to traditional gender stereotypical careers reserved for us by society, then that's fine. Let them be their best at it. Let them follow their hearts. But let's not insist upon it. Tell our daughters about Shantae. Let's tell them about Vernice. Tell our little girls about Gail and Laurie. Tell them about Ivana, Natalia, and Dr. Brenda Clare. Tell them about Aisha. Let them make paper planes and ships. Get them bed sheets and with aircrafts and sea vessels on them. Put up stickers in their rooms. Let them watch National Geographic for kids. Madam President, I encourage us all to take them to the coastlines across our Commonwealth to see the boats and ships dock or leave the harbor, or to one of our mini airports to watch the planes land. Point out the planes as they fly over us in the sky. Expose them to these modes of transportation as much as possible and let them know that the cockpits of planes and bridges of vessels is where girls belong. We must let them know, Madam President, that maritime and aviation are theirs to command and conquer. Get them familiar with maps. Point out various places to them and tell them that the way to get there is by air or sea. Let's reteach them the popular sing-along. Michelle, row the boat ashore. Hallelujah. Michelle, row the boat ashore. Hallelujah. Madam President, let us work as a community to show our girls that there is space for them. Let them know that there are no limits. Bahamian women who are succeeding in maritime, aviation, and aerospace engineering are not just opening the doors, Madam President, but they are holding them open so that others may follow. That is the responsibility of pioneers. Madam President, let us push our women and girls, men and boys in the Bahamas. Only through collaboration, a meeting of the minds, we will make our Commonwealth what it ought to be. It takes continued cooperation between men and women to advance the maritime and aviation sectors. After all, it is not one's capacity, it's one's capacity and competence that sets her or him apart from the rest, not his or her gender. I salute all who excel in these industries on this, the 60th anniversary of Bahamian women exercising the right to vote. Madam President, if anyone can, Bahamian women and girls can. Yes. God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Marathon.
Madam Speaker, Madam President, I would first like to say I want to personally recognize the pioneers and the fine women who have contributed significantly to this country. I personally say I salute all of you sitting in the gallery. Madam Speaker, I am humbled to stand in this honorable house and speak to the role that spiritual women leaders play in the development of the church post-1962. Madam Speaker, I must say I don't recall our spiritual leaders, women, being recognized in this way. I am honored to do this today. The best-selling author, Madam Speaker, the best-selling author, Anthony Robbins, said, "Knowledge is power, and power is knowledge in action." Madam Speaker, historically, and even in many nations or most cultures today, the purpose and the roles of women are misunderstood or not known. The leadership role of women in the church is a major blind spot for men and women in the church. As I stand here in this parliament, I am reminded that we are all beneficiaries of more than 200 years of parliamentary democracy. In other words, we are a beacon to the world. Madam Speaker, paradoxically, we are far behind the 8 ball in ordaining women to the office of priests and pastors. Madam Speaker, as we know, the major denominations in our nation is the Catholics, Anglicans, Baptists, Church of God, Methodists, the Seventh-day Adventists. It is only later did we extend to the full gospel, non-denominationals, and of course, the apostolic churches. These denominations have removed the invisible barriers that prevents women from rising to priesthood and to pastorship. And the church ought to be commended for making this revolutionary decision. Madam Speaker, the Baptists and the Church of God were among the first to embrace women as pastors in the 70s. The 1970s gave birth to women pastors like the late Reverend Clementina Stubbs of the Church of God, the late Reverend Lavinia Stewart of Mount Zion, and the late Reverend Ruth Bastian of Short Temple. Madam Speaker, today we recognize their service for these women. I consider it posthumously. Madam Speaker, it is with only 20 plus years ago that the first female priest was ordained in the Anglican Church. We are all familiar with her, I'm sure, Reverend Angela Palacios. She is one of those spiritual leaders who is significantly contributing to weakening the power of fear and discrimination against women. Our spiritual leaders are dismantling the walls of tradition that jail us. Their courage to depart from tradition to serve in the office of priest, pastor, or prophetess helps to disempower ignorance and empower families. Madam Speaker, these women help to demonstrate the valuable contribution of women in leadership roles in the church, and they certainly empower women in general. Madam Speaker, November is also an historic month for women. It has been 60 years since women voted for the first time in the Bahamas. Hence, we are celebrating 60 years of empowerment of Bahamian women through the women suffrage movement here in the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, it is therefore my privilege and honor to salute our women spiritual leaders who have and continue to man the walls of our nation. Women who preach, teach, prophesy, pray, and unveil and preserve the strength and the hedge of protection for our people. Madam Speaker, our women who have risen to this occasion as spiritual leaders in our country has contributed and protected our children and by extension our families. They have prayed for our politicians. They have prayed for the sick. They have prayed for the seniors. They have prayed for the brokenhearted. Women in leadership in the church, I say to you today, thank you, women, for impacting the moral fiber of our nation. Madam Speaker, time does not permit, nor do we know all of the names of those who deserve public recognition. However, we can celebrate in knowing that our Lord keeps accurate records of all, and our works will never be in vain. Madam Speaker, some of our spiritual trailblazers I must mention, and they are not in any particular order of who's the greatest and the leastest. No. And please forgive me for those who I may not have mentioned. Do not close your church doors on me. This is not intentional. I would like to recognize the Honorable Cynthia Mother Pratt, an assistant pastor, and the first female deputy prime minister, Ruby Ann Darling, Miss Ruby Ann Darling, an ordained minister, and the first female registered voter, Reverend Carla Culmer, Reverend Kenris Carey, Bishop Helen McPhee, Prophetess Catherine Chisholm, Apostle Brenda Pratt, Apostle Elaine Johnson, Apostle Lee Watson, Prophetess Salvadita Fowler, Prophetess Sheena Moss, Prophetess Ann Moss, Prophetess Patrice Smith, Prophetess Carol Colby, Prophetess Marty Nottage, Prophetess Shamika Morley, Prophetess Janet McPhee, Pastor Betty Clare, Pastor Gloria Ferguson, Pastor Rosetta Clare, Pastor Ann Higgins, Apostle Janice Jones, Pastor Cleotra William, Reverend Miriam Emmanuel. This is just to name a few. Madam Speaker, I dare not forget our spiritual female leaders in the family of violence. Apostle Dorinda Dean Andrus, Apostle Brinker Claire Andrus, Pastor When you see the member of parliament for Andrus, he was excited. Pastor Ophelia Cox Inagua, Pastor Inar Gray Exuma, Pastor Margaret Woodside Exuma, Pastor Barbara Gibson Crooked Island, Reverend Pauline Virgil Acklands, Pastor Sandra Bowles, Pastor Elva Dean, Pastor Vernon Stubbs, Pastor Poitier, Vernita Storr, Denise Bethel, Manette Poitier, Cat Island, Pastor Eula Johnson, Long Island, Prophetess Elmina Hanna Exuma. This is just a few. Madam Speaker, as we named a few of our pioneers earlier, we also pause to honor our warrior women pastors who followed the Reverend Bastians and Lavinia Stewarts. We honor the memory of the late Marina Sands and the late Reverend Ambassador Margaret MacDonald. Madam Speaker, what these women have done and continue to do is mentor our broken men and women who follow them. They lead prayer meetings and street meetings. They organize revivals at the time where crime continue to chip away our peace and safety. They nurture teen mothers. These are the women of Zion. They are the ones. Madam Speaker, they are the ones, and I'll tell you this, who speak, prophesy, and declare over the great women in business, in sports, in economics, in aviation, in every sphere of our life. It cannot be denied. They must be honored today. I stand and say in this honorable house, may the God of Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and Lisa continue may he continue to catapult these mighty warriors, these generals in the spirit, as they seek the Lord for directions to uplift and transform the Bahamas to be a better place. I say, we need you. I say it again, we need you. You prayer growers, you mighty warriors, we honor you today. Madam Speaker, many of our spiritual women leaders, I call them heroes. They are the glue that keep families together, communities, and our nation. Madam Speaker, these women follow in the footsteps of the trailblazers in the Bible. The work of spiritual women leaders is detailed in the Bible. Moses' sister was Miriam. She was a prophetess. There was also prophetess Huldah in the Old Testament. And of course, most of us know Deborah. She was the judge and the prophetess. There was no separation from state and the church. Madam Speaker, there is absolutely nothing new under the sun. What we see today is what has been happening many years ago. Female spiritual leadership continues in the New Testament. For example, there was Deacon Chloe, Apostle Junior, and Phoebe. Priscilla, the wife of Aquila. Together they met together to pray and to go over the word of God. And I see that happening today. Madam Speaker, I want to also commend the powerful evangelists of our nation, including Evangelist Barbara Williams, Column Collymore, Shirley Burroughs of Eleuthera, the Women United in Prayer movement led by Brenda Pinder, and the one that I am so familiar with, the Manning the Wall Intercessory Team by Apostle Brenda Pratt. I know firsthand of men and women who would have interacted with these women for various reasons. And I've seen that their lives have changed due to the anointing of God on their lives and the individualistic gifts that each of those women possess. The gift to heal, exhort, counsel, bestow wisdom, and it goes on and on. Madam Speaker, all the evidence is here. Men and women are equal. And I close with this truth. God made a covenant with Abraham and Sarah to bring forth his purpose for their lives. It shows equality. Many may stand and say they are not willing to be led by a woman spiritual leader. Well, I stand to say that I am. Madam Speaker, I do not see the person. I ignore them in the flesh being, but I recognize and I reverence the Spirit of God that operates in and through their lives. I honor the demonstration of healing, deliverance, and transformation operating through these powerful women as they are led by the Holy Spirit and not of their own. I know that God is to get the glory, not them. So today, I give God the glory for these fine women. Madam Speaker, God does not look at gender. He looks at who is available and willing. Leadership has no gender, and it is not prejudice. At least it should not be. Madam Speaker, I close the way I began. Knowledge is power, and power is knowledge in action. Let us follow God and commit to destroying the era of discrimination against women. Oneness, unity, is the most lethal weapon to defeat the enemy progress. And Madam Speaker, if nothing I say today is remembered, I want each of you to remember one thing. Everything that you see here today, it all first began in the spiritual realm. Before Angela Palacios became priest, it was manifested in the spiritual realm. Before Apostle Brenda Pratt became apostle, it was long birthed in the spiritual realm. Before Dame Janet Boswick became that great pioneer, it was given the stamp of approval in the spiritual realm. Before you became the speaker, God knew it. He had it for you. It was sealed in the spiritual realm. And then it's all manifested in the natural, on the day of ordination, on the day of swearing in, and the likes for all of these women. Madam Speaker, we should therefore continue our culture of including spiritual leaders in national events and in consultations. It is now equally important that we are more intentional by including our spiritual female leaders. Madam Speaker, and I close. Today, we build the best. And I close again. We build the best. Let us build the best little country in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. When you're finished with politics, I think the pulpit awaits you. As many, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Seabreeze.
The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Seabreeze.
Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Madam President, honourable members, distinguished guests. It was about 2 years ago when I rose in this honourable place for the very first time. At that time, I was an aspirant candidate participating in the historic Women in Parliament session. In preparation for today, I reflected on that same experience and how I was aspiring to be. And today, I can rise and say I am the Member of Parliament for Seabreeze. That feeling of aspiring to, hoping for, and pushing towards is a feeling I pray never leaves me, never leaves any of us. Just last week, I, along with some of my parliamentarian sisters, sat at the feet of Honourable Member for Angliston, Glenys Hannah Martin, and the first woman elected to the halls of Parliament, the Honourable Dame Janet Boswick, as a part of the 1973 Legends Masterclass series under the theme Breaking Barriers. As Dame Boswick and Minister Hannah Martin poured into us, shared their wisdom and experiences, there was a sense of aspiration, if I could describe it as such, oozing from the young women in the room. It was contagious. That sense of hope and gratitude that twinkled in their eyes at the mere possibilities of all that awaits them. They buzzed around with questions and their eyes lit up at the mere fact of being in the room. In the room with yesterday's and today's leaders, with women whose shoulders we are standing on, and among women whose shoulders they will stand on. They were inspired, They experienced in one evening all they aspired to be. May all of us here today, participating in this significant session, never forget that feeling, never losing sight that there is a young lady somewhere in our beautiful isles watching us, a young generation waiting on us, a seasoned generation holding us up, and the generation of today demanding of us to lead, to thrive, and empower. It is with this reminder that I am honored, Deputy Speaker, to rise in this honorable House and represent the amazing people of Seabreeze. I join the voices of my sister colleagues in representing all of the Bahamian women and girls everywhere, aspiring to advance national development, achieve equality, and experience equity as we chart the course for a stronger, more vibrant, more sustainable, and prosperous Bahamas. Deputy Speaker, I've been tasked with highlighting a special group of women and girls that are near and dear to my heart. The women and girls that have shaped and catapulted the development of the Bahamas through sports and culture. If you know me, among many things, I am an athlete and a cultural enthusiast. Two things I believe that are symbolic of being truly Bahamian. Sports represents our tenacity and determination as a people, and our cultural expression is an outlet for our creativity, our passion, and the gatekeeper of our history. It is in our step, our pitch, our jump shot, our dive that we prove our standard of excellence and world-class achievements. It is in our rhythm, our dance, our spoken word, beaten drum, handcrafted masterpieces that we tell our stories, express our uniqueness, and showcase our pride. Interestingly, I've spent the past year diving even deeper into our culture, as I have the honor of chairing the Independent Secretariat Commission for our nation's 50th independence celebrations. I am humbled by the Honorable Prime Minister and the Cabinet of the Bahamas for entrusting me to lead a team of world-class professionals to curate such a milestone for our country. After Dorian and COVID, and in the midst of economic changes and unforeseen circumstances, this team must remind the country that we have something to celebrate, so much to be proud of. And today, as women, as always, we are getting the celebration started. Yes. What's very interesting, Deputy Speaker, before we achieved the right to vote, we as women always had the right to create. Madam Speaker, I recall, and I am sure many of you ladies in here today can relate, sitting at the feet of our grandmothers, like mine, Alice Marie Bastian and Sybil Lockhart Miller, as they sewed from small hem repairs to school uniforms to fancy dresses for church. Now we have designers gracing the stages of international fashion shows, showcasing Bahamian couture, from swimwear to formal wear, from creative tees to bridal gowns. The evolution of our creativity demonstrates our capacity, but more importantly, the tenacity of our creatives to take the Bahamas to the world. From one ambassador to another, I salute you champions of Bahamian creativity. I think we can all reflect briefly on many of the historical moments that ushered in change, and how at the moment's notice, at an arm's length, right along with our forefathers, were our foremothers, answering the call to fight, to speak up, and to march on. Among them were our straw vendors, women who have shaped with their hands token of our hospitality, women in our resilience and showcase our ability to take something and make it everything. Straw vendors who have welcomed our tourists, sacrificed to strengthen our middle class, advocated for the least of us, worked hard for the most of us, and ushered in techniques and methods that international designers envy. Their hands have shaped the way we create, representing the way we as Bahamian women can bend, twist, flex, but we do not break. Deputy Speaker, in keeping with the spirit of resilience and creativity, I am reminded of the words of Miss Arlene Nash Ferguson, one of the queens of Junkanoo, who was quoted in a recent BBC article. Madam Speaker, in keeping with the spirit of resilience and creativity, I am reminded of the words of Mrs. Arlene Nash Ferguson, one of our queens of Junkanoo, who was quoted in a recent BBC article as follows: "Junkanoo itself is the story of resilience. It is really a symbol of how strong and determined we are as a people. We've had Dorian and now we have COVID. And as we have done with every other crisis before this, we will survive. As we say in the Bahamas, we will bounce back. And that is just a part of who we is, to put it in Bahamian English." Madam Speaker, Junkanoo is a major part of who we is as Bahamians, who we is as Bahamian women. Junkanoo is a celebration, an unbreakable connection to our heritage and our ancestors. It connects all of us across the islands in spite of our socioeconomic differences, age, or gender. Junkanoo is a celebration that symbolizes the very nature of Bahamian womanhood, Bahamian motherhood. The ability to take raw materials and birth masterpieces. The fortitude to create and cultivate the greatest show on earth. The intricacies of design, the hypnotizing dance moves, the energetic sounds, and the unforgettable feeling of Junkanoo music is unmatched and world-renowned. What's most important to highlight, Madam Speaker, is the role that women have played in such a pivotal part of who we are as a people. In the same article, Mrs. Nash Ferguson recalls a time in the 1940s when Junkanoo wasn't something women in particular participated in. There was a time when women were bystanders, and again a time when women merely tricked costumes and danced on the sidelines. But now, shoulder to shoulder, we see women beating goatskin drums and shaking cowbells. We experiencing women who have built costumes from concepts to realization. We see women leading Junkanoo groups and adding to value to the way we experience Junkanoo and take Junkanoo to the world. There's a common phrase amongst Junkanooers: "Don't get Jeff." It's a phrase to reflect costumes that never make it to Bay and get left in the shack. Women in this honorable place and Bahamian women everywhere, I want to remind you, don't get Jeff. Do not be left behind this lap. Do not allow the limited resources, the pressures of time, the noise in the shack, the unforeseen challenges to cause you to leave your dreams, your purpose, your gifts and talents behind. Ladies, this is a clarion call and a reminder to understand the assignment. We need you to rise to the occasion. We need you to finish what you've started. What you are creating is needed beyond the shack. Get to work and get on Bay. Yes. Madam Speaker, time doesn't permit me to dissect every precious and valuable aspect of our cultural contribution as Bahamian women, but I cannot take my seat without sharing these three nuggets with you. Firstly, we as Bahamian women have evolved our cultural experiences and expertise into local and global enterprises. More and more women are artists, artisans, chefs, food manufacturers, writers, entertainers, creatives. We have broken barriers in entrepreneurship and economic freedom. From Bahamian teas to pepper jellies and jams, Kung Fritter batter sold in food stores, international Bahamian restaurants, products on international shelves, international records and awards. Best-selling authors and poets, digital creators and national influencers. We are proud, but we are also thriving and prosperous and shaping the way that our nation and the world views and values Bahamian women. Secondly, we as women, especially Bahamian women, have to constantly fight this narrative that women don't support women. The thing is, culturally, it naturally unites us. From dance practices in preparation of Fox Hill Day, to choir rehearsals, to Junkanoo practices on Sunday nights, shared spaces at art galleries, collaborative fashion shows, mic checks for pub bands, shared boat rides at regattas, duet songs and shared studios. We unite. In cause and in culture, we find a rhythm we can all dance to. We find a beat that we can all march to, and we celebrate the similarities that connect us. Culture celebrates all that unites us, all that binds us, all that keeps us moving forward, upward, and onward together as Bahamians, as Bahamian women. Thirdly, we as women has always used our culture to express ourselves, our joy, our pain, our grief, our frustration, our freedom, our womanhood, through our art, stage plays, rehearsed dances, songs over gumbe beats and rake and scrape. We've shared our stories with each other and with the world. May we never lose our freedom of expression, never limit the power of our culture, and never underestimate a Bahamian woman with a mic, a pen, a sewing needle, or a rhythm. Madam Speaker, on another note, one thing is also for certain: never underestimate a Bahamian woman in sports. Our Bahamian female athletes are more golden than the medals they have adorned, more prized than their countless trophies, and stronger than any race or obstacle they've faced. In our lifetime, we've seen our golden girls take the world by storm and make room for Tonique, Shawnee, and countless others. We've witnessed the breaking of barriers, the jumping of hurdles, literally and figuratively, by Bahamian women challenging the status quo, beating national and international records, and grabbing the world's attention. We have seen Bahamian women in swimming, golf, tennis, basketball, softball, flag football, track and field, bodybuilding, and soccer defy the odds and take the Bahamas to the world. Because of their determination, their commitment, and their unwavering Bahamian pride, we've heard our national anthem play and our flag draped in arenas all around the world. Because of them, the world marks the manner of our bearing. Because of them, millions around the world know that we are the most beautiful and talented little country in the world. From one ambassador to another, I salute you, champions of Bahamian excellence and resilience. Madam Speaker, did you know that we are kicking off the road to 50th independence celebrations with a race of our very own? Our own golden girl, Pauline Davis, has already graced the New Providence route, and I wish to challenge all of my colleagues here and every woman and girl that hears this to join in this race to 50 on Saturday, December 3rd. When we developed this event, we only had in mind an activity that promoted our nation to be healthier and to be in a better shape as we usher in our 50th anniversary as an independent nation. But today, I am sounding the call for our Bahamian women and girls everywhere to join in the race to 50. Registration is free. You can walk or run or push, and it's happening nationwide on every island and every key. But Madam Speaker, I want everyone to know at the sound of my voice to join me and take it as a symbolic lap as we usher in the next 50 years of our country. Let's run a race united. Let's run a race as equal and equitable contributors to our nation's development and progress. Let's run a race that demonstrates our value and our tenacity. Let's run a race that our foremothers only dreamed of being able to do. Let's run a race that allows the next generation to fly. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to my colleagues for this wonderful opportunity. Let's run.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Speaker is beaming with pride at the women today. As many?
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Barnett Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for extending to the Senate an invitation to meet in this joint session of Parliament to explore the contribution of women to the development of the Bahamas. Madam President, in the 1950s, the fierce and determined women of the suffragette movement in the Bahamas started to advocate not only for the rights of women to vote, but equal rights and opportunities for all Bahamians. Madam President, there is one particular suffragette whose indomitable spirit remains close to my heart. My daughter is the great-great-granddaughter of Eugenia Lockhart. As we have heard here today, the suffragette movement was a catalyst for women to step out of the shadows and to make an indelible mark on the development of the Bahamas. Women became acutely aware of what they could accomplish, and we will see that in the public service and the administration of justice, just as those other areas, women added to the history and improvement of the country. Women have always been present in the public service, but their presence was limited to traditional fields such as teaching, nursing, or as administrative assistants. Women gained access to these professions via on-the-job training and experience. Their opportunities for tertiary education were limited. But those suffragettes, with what only could be described as an advanced understanding of the way forward, recruited younger women like Dame Ivy Dumont to join the cause, but in a different way. They became involved in the teachers' union and used the power of the collective to advance the status of women. These women were less focused on the right to vote. They were focused on the overall economic and social improvement of women. The teaching profession in itself had limitations. The term headmaster acted as a ceiling which prevented women from being principals of high schools. Women were not allowed to work on the family islands. Those postings were reserved for men until women were able to get that post-secondary education and qualifications which previously eluded them. Men like Cecil Curling and Arlington Butler worked with female teachers to do their A-levels, making teachers eligible for those postings which were previously out of reach. Madam President, the advance was in progress. Women like Katrina Cartwright and Katie Davis were given the opportunity to study abroad at St. Benedict University in Minnesota. Another group of women went to the University of Miami. As women achieved paper certifications to pair with their years of experience, they pushed harder. They weren't accepting no for an answer. As Senator Maxine Seymour said, competence and capability are not influenced by gender, but opportunities for Bahamian women outside of teaching, nursing, and administrative assistance was limited. progress was limited to the Ministry of Education, and women like Dame Ivy Dumont, Susan Wallace, and Sadie Curtis made their mark in the ministry after spending time in the classroom. If a woman was considered for a senior public officer post, foreign women were preferred. It was not easy to transfer from one service to another. There was an expectation that these women would remain teachers and nurses for life. But when women received those diplomas, they gained confidence, and they were able to push for positions in other ministries, but teaching and nursing remained the main entry point. The formidable Cynthia Mother Pratt initially joined the public service as a nurse. As women joined other areas of the public service, they thrived. The political directive developed and appreciated that women brought a different type of organizational skill. We are deliberate in our actions. The skills we honed while managing our households translated seamlessly into the administration of the public service. By the 1980s, teaching and nursing were no longer entry points. The public administration diploma provided another avenue for women to receive the accreditation they needed to justify further advancement in the public service. Departments like the Treasury were among the first to see women like Eugenie Cartwright in leadership. Women like Margaret MacDonald, the first cabinet secretary, Melanie Roach, the first director of works in the Ministry of Works, Barbara Pierre, the first director of immigration, Ethlyn Isaacs, the first female financial secretary. As women advanced in the public service, they paved the way for women who came after them, offering mentoring and guidance. Ruth Miller was known for her willingness to provide guidance and training opportunities for other public servants, particularly women. Willa Mae Salke and Elma Garraway remain known for their no-nonsense attitude and their teamwork approach. But the advancement of women in the public service remains an issue that requires a deliberate approach. Formal training has provided women with unequivocal evidence of their merits. And just as former Speaker Rome Italia Johnson is advocating for the Janet G. Boswick Institute for Political Leadership, it would be appropriate to have a public service training institute to provide our public service with continuing education and training. With the launchpad of a teaching career, women have gone on to other careers. A number of highly qualified teachers left the teaching profession to become lawyers. They include Sharon Lady Wilson, Claire Hepburn, Ellen Serville, Elma Campbell, Diane Stewart, and Etta Dumont. Out of this group of women, 3 went on to become members of the judiciary, 2 ambassadors, a cabinet ministers, 3 became members of the Senate, including the president of the Senate. With the growth of women in the legal profession, we have also seen growth in the judiciary. The first female lawyer, Patricia Causey, was admitted to the Bahamas Bar in 1953. There were 3 female lawyers admitted to the bar in the 1960s, Eileen DePuch-Caron, Jeannie Thompson, and Ruby Bethel Nottage. By August 1978, women made up 12% of the legal profession. And everybody knows, we received our first female Attorney General, Dame Janet Boswick, in 1992. Since then, we have had 2 additional female Attorney Generals, Claire Hepburn and Allison Maynard Gibson. Ms. Gibson also went on to become our first female Queen's Counsel, now called King's Counsel. Dame Joan Sawyer is a woman of firsts in the judiciary of the Bahamas, the first female judge, the first and only substantive female Chief Justice, the first female president of the Court of Appeal, and the first Bahamian on the Privy Council. She was succeeded by another female, Dame Anita Allen, who was the first jurist to be appointed to the president of the Court of Appeal directly from from the Supreme Court. Dame Anita remains active in the administration of justice as head of the Law Reform Commission. Other female jurists include other female Supreme Court judges include the retired Justice Jeannie Thompson, the retired Justice Ruby Nottage, retired Justice Vera Watkins, retired Justice Rhonda Bain, retired Justice Acel Gray Evans, and the recently retired Justice Ruth Bo Darville. In the 1990s, 56% of our lawyers were women. This increased to 57% in the early 2000s. And during that time, half of the appointments to the judiciary were women. Now, over 63% of our women are lawyers. 63% of our lawyers are women. Currently, 12 of our 18 Supreme Court judges are women, 4 of our 6 registrars are women, and 10 of our 18 magistrates are women. Women make up 61% of our judiciary at the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, time does not permit me to name all of them, but I encourage the public to visit the judiciary website, www.bahamasjudiciary.com, where they are helpfully identified. All of our judges in the Industrial Tribunal are women. Unfortunately, despite having 2 female presidents in its history, the makeup of the Court of Appeal only has 2 women, Justice Crane Scott and Justice Carolita Bethel. Madam President, I'll have to speak to you-know-who about that. Madam President, law enforcement has notoriously been a male-dominated area, and the advancement of women in this environment is praiseworthy. Again, gaining the right to vote acted as a catalyst to advance women in the police force. Women voted for the first time in 1962, and a mere 2 years later, in 1964, women were allowed to apply to be police officers. 122 women applied, and 6 of them began training. They were Anita Bethel, Teresa Baker, Norma Clark, Alceda McFall, Hildred McLean, and Esther Stubbs. In order to train these new recruits, the police force had to hire Sergeant Audrey Way from the Metropolitan Police Force in Yorkshire, England. Prior to this, civilian women only served in the police force as matrons, and her job was to assist the male officers when women and children were in police custody. In 1967, women began to advance in the police force. 4 females were promoted to Lance Corporal: Jacqueline Daniels, Esther Stubbs, Norma Clark, and Loma Culmer. The first Assistant Commissioner, Juanita Colebrook, became the first woman in the senior leadership of the police force. Other women who have achieved notable firsts in the police force are Dorothy Davis, Delmita Turnquest, Denise Tynes, Ruby Colley Saunders, Killy Hasty, and Allardyce Strawn. Women have become a part of all sections of the police force and are included in all aspects of its decision-making and administration. Women in the police force have pushed past the traditional limitations and stereotypes which restricted their predecessors. Unfortunately, no woman has advanced to the post of Commissioner of Police. Yet. Women entered the Defense Force later in 1985. The historic squad of 16, Prenell Ambister, Shane Bain, Cheryl Bethel, Minez Cargill, Bianca Clare, Carolyn Douglas, Cynthia Edgecombs, Gleneva Evans, Ida Mae Ferguson, Christine Gibson, Marsha Grant, Gay Major, Juliana Major, Ora Pratt, Joan Thompson, and Vera Wood. They thought these women would provide them with much-needed administrative and clerical assistance, but these women had greater things in mind. Cheryl Bethel and Gay Major went on to become the first commissioned female officers, and Gay Major went on to become the lieutenant commander and was the first female to become a senior officer in the force. There are currently a total of 15 women in the officer corps compared to 106 males. That's only 15%. The leadership team consists solely of male officers, and it has been that way since the inception of the force. No female has ever broken the barrier and held the rank of captain. The highest rank a female has ever held is that of commander. 23% of the police force is women, and I look forward to reviewing that number on the 70th anniversary of women's suffrage. Other notable women in the Defense Force: Commander Natasha Miller is the first female commanding officer of the Military Police and Force Protection Department. She was also the first female executive officer of the HMBS Nassau and the first female to obtain a bridge watchkeeping certificate. Lieutenant Commander Samantha Hart, the first female commanding officer of the HMBS Cascarilla. Petty Officer Denise Oliver, first female physical training instructor. Leading woman Jamie Clare, the first female diver. Petty Officer Pearline Morley and leading woman Ominique Seymour, who are female engineers in their predominantly male engineering department. Special mention to the late Cynthia Edgecombe, the first female stenographer, Ida Mae Ferguson, who was the first female force chief, and Christine Smith, who served as an air condition technician. The suffragette movement has directly and indirectly inspired our desire to be active participants in the development of the Bahamas. It is not simply enough to be in the room where decisions are made. Women must be active voices around the table. And I pause here to recognize the women that in 2002 made up the largest group of women in the House of Assembly: Agatha Marcel, Melanie Griffin, Glenys Hannah Martin, Cynthia Mother Pratt, Allison Maynard Gibson, Veronica Owens, Pleasant Bridgewater, and Anne Presenti. Thank you for making our presence in this place a norm. We have made considerable advances, but we are still on the rough side of the mountain, and we must continue to push for equal protection and equal rights. We must continue our demand to be heard and demonstrate that women add value, and to fight for the women who will come after us. Madam President, like those invincible suffragettes, we must be joined by men who believe that we are entitled to have the same opportunities, rights, and protections as men. I am particularly grateful for the support of the Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Michael Pintard, who offered his unconditional support when I chose to make marital rape the topic of my first public address. The suffragette movement succeeded because they support each other. I am grateful to Dame Ivy Dumont, Willa Mae Sulky, Elma Garrelay, Darnella Bodie, Commander Natasha Miller, Assistant Commissioner Delarice Ferguson, and my colleague, learned friend, former police officer, the Minister of State for Social Services, the Honorable Lisa Ramming, who all provided me with the invaluable information and guidance as I prepared this contribution. In contributions of this nature, where we recognize people who have made an impact, there is an extremely high probability that somebody will be left out. To those who have been left out, I apologize. But this exercise demonstrates that we as women must tell our stories. We cannot rely on others to record and recognize our accomplishments. We must record her story. Madam President, the suffragettes inspired and motivated our grandmothers to make great strides in the economic advancement of women. This is a relay, and we now have the baton. We must continue to make strides so that our daughters, nieces, and grandchildren have a chance to truly be equal. We run things, and we shall not be moved. We run things. We shall not be moved. Madam President, may God continue to give us the strength to fight for the social and economic advancement of women, and may God continue to bless our beautiful Bahama land.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator Michael Bonnet Ellis.
As many, the chair recognizes the honourable member for Elizabeth.
Madam Speaker, 40 years ago, the Right Honourable Dame Janet Boswick shattered the glass ceiling for Bahamian women with her general election victory, becoming our nation's first female member of Parliament. As a young girl, Madam Speaker, I remember being in absolute awe of this strong, beautiful, brown-skinned Bahamian woman with her nicely coiffed hair, elegantly draped scarf, and immaculately fixed lapel pin. I remember the commanding power of her words and the ease and eloquence with which she spoke. For generations of women, Madam Speaker, Dame Janet Boswick is considered the quintessential representative of Bahamian women in politics. The first woman to serve as acting Prime Minister and the first woman Attorney General, Dame Boswick elevated the cause of women and demonstrated to the world that Bahamian women can and will. Make no mistake about it. Sure. Madam Speaker, it is because of Dame Janet Boswick's national service and that of other elected women parliamentarians that thousands of Bahamian girls and women know that a female can serve as a member of Parliament in the Bahamas. I sincerely thank Dame Boswick for being a mentor, inspiration, and hero to many Bahamian women, and for bringing us along with her through that shattered glass ceiling. Madam Speaker, in a stirring speech to the members of Parliament on the 19th of January, 1959, glass ceiling breaker Dame Doris Johnson said in support of Bahamian women gaining the right to vote, and I quote, "We women press this demand and act such enactment on the basis of not who is right, but what is right for our country. We judge expediency only on this basis. We seek no compromise. There is no alternative. We arbor any delay in action. We women ask only that you gentlemen move now to secure the rights of 54,000 women, including wives and daughters," end quote. Those words, Madam Speaker, spoken by Dame Johnson in a then British colony some 41 years after women gained the right to vote in the United Kingdom, 15 years after universal adult suffrage in Jamaica and Barbados, and some 14 years after women gained the right to vote in Trinidad and Tobago, marked a significant turning point for the struggle for universal adult suffrage in the Bahamas. A glass ceiling breaker, Dame Johnson would go in on Bahamian history to be the first Bahamian woman to contest the general election in the Bahamas, the first female appointed to the Senate, and to serve as the president of the upper house, the first woman to be made a government minister, and the first woman to serve as acting governor general. In more than 6 decades since those impactful words were uttered, Madam Speaker, the Bahamas has undergone an incomplete but revolutionary period of glass ceiling breaking change and progress for women in politics and nation building.
I use the word incomplete, Madam Speaker, not to diminish the glass ceiling breaking achievements of strong Bahamian women in politics and nation building, like the Honorable Dame Doris Johnson, the Right Honorable Dame Janet Boswick, the Honorable Dame Ivy Dumont, the Honorable Cynthia Mother Pratt, the Honorable Loretta Butler Turner, and the Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin, but in recognition of the fact that the empowerment and upward mobility of women in politics will always be a continuous journey, not a destination. Madam Speaker, in 1978, during a panel discussion about women's aspirations in the United States called Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, Marilyn Loden coined the phrase glass ceiling. The term, Madam Speaker, refers to sometimes invisible barrier to success that women come up against in their careers. While other panelists chose to talk about women's socialization, the way women were perceived to behave, and the looks of women, Loden elevated the depth of the conversation by talking about the resistance in organizations to female leaders beyond the lowest rung of the ladder. In the 1940s, the 1950s, and early 1960s, Bahamian women faced many barriers in their political aspirations. Or in other words, Madam Speaker, a glass ceiling. Fueled by a deeply ingrained cultural bias, the role of women in politics was confined to the home and that of a supportive but quiet spouse in the public. Boy, has that changed. In fact, one member of parliament at the time said that women would get the right to vote, and I quote, over my dead body, end quote. While women gained the right to vote in the United Kingdom in 1918 and in major Caribbean countries like Jamaica and Barbados in 1944 and Trinidad and Tobago in 1945, women in the Bahamas, Madam Speaker, were not afforded the right to vote until 1962. Going a bit deeper, the Bahamas achieved universal adult suffrage after smaller and less populated Caribbean islands like St. Lucia, Dominica, and Grenada. I share these historical observations so that our Bahamian women and young girls can truly appreciate the history and the struggle of our glass ceiling breaking forebears. No Bahamian young girl or woman should ever take for granted the rights we enjoy today. Madam Speaker, as we pause to celebrate the 60th anniversary of women's suffrage movement in the Bahamas, I'm extremely humbled to be afforded the opportunity to pay tribute to women in politics and nation building. The theme of my contribution, Madam Speaker, is Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, celebrating 60 years of Bahamian glass ceiling breaking women in politics. I choose to include the phrase mirror, mirror on the wall in the theme of my presentation, not to invoke the fairy tale of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but to remind all women in politics and those aspiring to nation building of who we are and from whence we came. The greatest power of a mirror is in its ability to reflect. A mirror reflects our history. A mirror reflects our journey. A mirror reflects our progress. Madam Speaker, who we are today as women in politics and nation building is a reflection of the sweat, blood, and tears of women who came before us. Those glass ceiling breakers. Women like Mary Ingram, Mabel Walker, Georgina Simonette, and Eugenia Lockhart, who started the women's suffragist movement, campaigned for universal adult suffrage in 1950, and those women who worked tirelessly to further the advancement of women. Glass ceiling breakers like Irma Grant Smith, Lady Russell, the wife of Sir Dudley Russell, and Beryl Hannah. I brought my mirror to this special sitting of Parliament, Madam Speaker, because in my reflection, I see the enduring example of Bahamian women, especially young girls, and to my daughter, of
a young Rubian Cooper Darling registering to vote and impacting the course of history in our nation. In this mirror, I see strength and a no-nonsense attitude of dozens of glass ceiling breakers, like the Honorable Teresa Moxie Ingram, the Honorable Rome Italia Johnson, the Honorable Sylvia Scriven, the Honorable Wanian Dorset, the Honorable Z.C. Allison Maynard Gibson, the Honorable C.V. Hope Strawn, the Honorable Lanisha Roll, the Honorable Chanel Ferguson, and the Honorable Miriam Emanuel. In this mirror, this powerful and reflective mirror, Madam Speaker, that we must use to teach our young girls and women about the history of our journey in the political arena and the value of not being afraid to stand up. Madam Speaker, as a young female parliamentarian, I am so very proud of the legacy that has been gifted to me. As the mother of a young, beautiful, brown-skinned girl, I'm excited to share important historical observations like the successive female presidents of the Senate, the Honorable Lynn Holowesko, the Honorable Sharon Wilson, the Honorable Kay Forbes Smith, the Honorable Mildred Hall Watson, and now the Honorable Lachelle Adderley, and the value of their impact in molding our views on women leadership. As I stand in this chamber, Madam Speaker, I stand erect, proud, and dignified because of the glass ceiling breaking class of 2002 female members of Parliament. The Honorable Agatha Marcel, the Honorable Veronica Owens, the Honorable Pleasant Bridgewater, the Honorable Ann Perseni, the Honorable Z.C. Allison Maynard Gibson, the Honorable Melanie Griffin, the Honorable Cynthia Mother Pratt, and the Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin. Today I serve with my glass ceiling breaking sisters, the Honorable Speaker of the House, Patricia DeVoe, the Honorable Ginger Moxie, the Honorable Pia Glover Roll, the Honorable Lisa Ramming, the Honorable Leslie Miller Bryce, the Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin. From the Upper House, the Honorable Lachelle Adderley, the Honorable Aricia Hepburn, the Honorable Maxine Seymour, and the Honorable Michaela Barnett Ellis. We are the successors of an enduring legacy and the guardians of the rights of women in politics. This is an awesome but serious responsibility. As I stand, Madam Speaker, permit me to also note the historical nature of this special sitting. Anchored with the powerful image of two beautiful, strong women leading two chambers of Parliament in the Bahamas, today's observation is made more powerful by your collective president. Madam Speaker, we remember the unpaid service of the Prime Minister's wives, Her Excellency Dame Marguerite Pendant, Lady Dolores Ingram, Lady Bernadette Christie, Lady Patricia Minnis, and now Lady Anne Marie Davis, to our nation, and for shining the light on many causes in the Bahamas. As I have stated before, our journey in politics is not complete. While we've had women acting as prime ministers for short periods of time, our nation has never elected a female to that office after serving as leader of a political party and winning a general election. However, Madam Speaker, it should be noted that we've had women serving as deputy leaders of two of our major political parties. We've also had women serving as secretary generals of two major political parties. I speak of Honorable Dame Ivy Dumont and the Honorable Teresa Moxie Ingram from the Free National Movement, and Barbara Pierre, one of the longest serving secretary generals of any political party in the Bahamas. And sitting in our gallery. And she's also the first female director of immigration. And now also serving Barbara Cartwright from the Progressive Liberal Party. And then, Madam Speaker, we have the monumental service of glass ceiling breaker, the Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin. The first woman to be elected chairman of a major political party in the English-speaking Caribbean. With her 5th consecutive election victory, my colleague, the Member of Parliament for Engliston, became the 7th longest-serving female elected parliamentarian in the English-speaking Caribbean. She follows trailblazers like Eugenia Childs of Dominica, Portia Simpson Miller, and Olivia Babsby Grange of Jamaica, Kamala Persuade of Trinidad and Tobago, Mia Motley and Cynthia Ford of Barbados. Within this elite group of glass ceiling breaking females, Madam Speaker, are prime ministers and senior government ministers and strong representatives of Caribbean women. Madam Speaker, while I note the historical significance of the women's suffrage movement on the life of our nation, it is important to note that there are still areas in our national development that require growth, progress, and perhaps some have argued common sense and downright decency. Going further, almost 50 years, Madam Speaker, let me say that again, almost 50 years after independence, children born to our Bahamian sisters outside the Bahamas are not considered automatic Bahamians. While we celebrate today, Madam Speaker, we, the current women in Parliament, must remember the reflections of our Bahamian glass ceiling breaking ancestors and proudly carry the baton that has been passed to us. As we look into the mirror, we not only carry the spirit of Dame Dr. Doris Johnson, Dame Janet Boswick, and other glass ceiling breaking women, but also a burning passion to birth all the dreams and unfulfilled goals of the women's suffrage movement in the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, as I take my seat, I end as I have started with the words of Dame Dr. Doris Johnson. These words spoken in 1975 remain true today, and I quote, "The times demands that Caribbean women must learn that they must either, as we say in the Bahamas, fish or cut bait. I plead with our men not to remain asleep through this women's revolutionary period. All must participate if the ship of state that we have taken into the treacherous sea of independence is to survive. It will take the conscientious effort of men and women in the town, as well as men and women in the field and rural areas, to make their contribution," end quote. May God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Powerful. It is removed and seconded that the following resolution be agreed.
I get that from Brussels.
Whereas the Parliament of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, on behalf of the Bahamas, recognize, honor, and salute Mrs. Mary Ingram, Mrs. Eugenia Lockhart, Mrs. Georgiana K. Simonet, Mrs. Mabel Walker, and Dame Doris Johnson, God-fearing women who, in their quest for justice and equity for all Bahamians, established and led the women's suffrage movement with the support of other women. Be it therefore resolved that the Parliament and people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas do honor, recognize, and forever celebrate the vision and courage of the leaders and members of the women's suffrage movement, their contribution to the enfranchisement, universal suffrage, and social and political change in the Bahamas. This 60th anniversary of the enfranchisement of women and the continued work and contribution of women in and to the Bahamas. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried.
Honorable Senators, as many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. The resolution is agreed.
This joint sitting has agreed to the resolution. Further resolutions? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Engliston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And finally, a resolution, and it is without dispute and will be unanimously accepted. And I will move, and a member of the opposition will second. And I read now the following resolution. Whereas women have been in the forefront of the struggle for equality and justice in the Bahamas from the dawn of that struggle in the New World, starting with poor black Kate, who paid the ultimate price. And whereas there is no fitting symbol to commemorate the contribution of women, even though they walked side by side with men at every stage of our national journey. And whereas Janet Gwyneth Bostwick is the embodiment of all that we celebrate as women on this solemn occasion, being the first woman elected to the Parliament of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and our first acting Prime Minister. And whereas Janet Gwyneth Bostwick has distinguished herself as a Bahamian patriot of the first order, who happens to be a woman. And whereas Janet Gwyneth Bostwick is an enduring symbol of accomplished womanhood in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, having excelled in every sphere of our national life. And whereas Janet Gwyneth Bostwick is an endearing symbol of the contribution of women to the continuing development of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Be it therefore resolved that this Parliament, meeting in joint session, pay tribute to the life, legacy, and contributions of the Right Honourable Dame Janet Gwyneth Bostwick by displaying a large framed photograph of her, and this is a first, on the southern wall of the chamber of this Honourable House of Assembly. Let us take to our feet. Be it further resolved that should the chamber of this Parliament be moved, and we're hoping that there will be another location, a fitting symbol be erected in commemoration and honor of this woman and of this occasion. I so move. Thank you. We have to second it. So we take off. See? Yes, thank you.
Is there a seconder?
Wait. You second it? Okay. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Maxine Seymour.
Thank you, Madam President. Today we salute Dame Janet, a forerunner who paved the way for us all. She was appointed to the Senate in 1977, the year I was born. In 1982, she became the first woman elected to the House of Assembly, where she remained for 2 decades. Dame Janet served as the first woman Attorney General of our country, the first woman Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the first woman to act as Prime Minister, among many other notable firsts. In 2021, she received the prestigious CARICOM Triennial Award for Women. Her accomplishments were fueled by her inner strength and that of Almighty God, her creator and sustainer. Indeed, there is and has always been something inside so strong. The more they refused to hear Dame Janet's voice, the louder she sang and the brighter she shined. Dame Janet looked everyone in the eye, and she did it anyway. She broke the glass ceiling, and now there is something strong inside of every little girl across our archipelago. Today, one of the most gratifying things for women across the divide is being able to access Dame Janet. She is always willing to answer our questions and provide timeless guidance. May we continue to excel in politics and every other sphere of influence as a tribute to pioneers like Dame Janet, whose accomplishments will always be remembered by those who enter this honorable place. I second the resolution to have Dame Janet's photo affixed within the inner chamber of the House of Assembly, where she once sat as the first woman elected to this Parliament.
It has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed. Whereas women have been in the forefront of the struggle for equality and justice in the Bahamas from the dawn of that struggle in the New World, starting with poor Black Kate, who paid the ultimate price. Be it further resolved that should the chamber of this Parliament be moved to another location, a fitting symbol be erected in commemoration and honor of this occasion. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand.
Honorable Senators, as many as are in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. The resolution is agreed. Further resolutions? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Alcides.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the Senate at its rising do adjourn sine die.
Is there a seconder?
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate at its rising do adjourn sine die. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion is agreed. Final adjournment. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Alcides.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now adjourn. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The Senate stands adjourned. Sine die.
For the resolutions,
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House on its rising adjourn to 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Is there a seconder? Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the House at its rising do adjourn to 3 o'clock this afternoon. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Final adjournment?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourns to 3 o'clock this afternoon.
It has been moved and seconded. It has been moved and seconded that the House do now adjourn. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The House stands adjourned until 3 o'clock this afternoon.
All right!